Chapter 179. For a young girl, helping a boy tidy up his tie was undoubtedly a very intimate action. After all, in the eyes of most people, this action was done by the wife for the husband. If it was just an ordinary student, it would not be done at all. What's more, if the girl had a sweet smile on her face when she was helping the boy tidy up his tie, then it was even more obvious that the girl had fallen into a whirlpool of love at a glance. For Dory No. 1 High School, which emphasized on learning, although male and female relationships were strictly prohibited, there were still some couples who secretly played tricks on each other. No matter what, 16-year-old young people were at the age where they were strongly curious about the opposite sex. It was normal for them to have feelings for each other. This was human nature. However, no matter how normal it was, the fact that Miss Colored Glaze was tidying up a boy's tie at the school gate with a sweet smile on her face and eyes full of love was like a bolt from the blue. The sound of a pair of underwear shattering countless people's glasses and also shook the No. 1 High School's BBS. No one knew if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but this morning, Colored Glaze's action of tidying up Ryuto's tie at the school gate happened to be recorded by an expert from the photography department. Under the camera of this student with the online name, successor of teacher Guan Shi, Ryuto and Colored Glaze were standing in front of the school gate. The former stood still while the latter leaned forward slightly and reached out to help the former straighten his collar. The resolution of this photo was high enough to be magnified to the point where every detail of the two's faces could be seen clearly. Ryuto's face had a look of disbelief, while Colored Glaze had a smile of a girl in love. Once this photo was published, it immediately became the most familiar photo in the entire Dory No. 1 High School in just a short morning. It also set off a frenzy of discussion on the school forum. Thousands of posts related to this matter appeared in just a short morning, and the post that was pushed to the top was a new voting post. The total number of votes was quite astonishing. Perhaps it was a coincidence. The last post that caused such a reaction was, "What do you think is the relationship between Yun-Yen and that person?" This time, the title of the voting post was, "What kind of punishment do you think Ryuto Kiryu should receive?" After an entire morning, the voting results for this post were as follows. There were 276,829,210 votes for hang. The number of votes for death by dismemberment was 3,686,100,021. The number of votes for just kill him first was uncountable. It had exceeded the upper limit. Compared to the last time when Ryuto and Yun-Yen walked side by side through the school gate, the tie incident at the gate was obviously more shocking. Almost all the students of Dory No. 1 High School had stopped attending classes. They were crazily using their phones to read, post, and flame Ryuto in the classroom. In fact, when the teacher stood on the podium and looked around, all he could see was the clattering of phones. In the end, the teacher stopped attending classes. He turned on the projector and played an educational video. He also picked up his phone and joined the battle against the great villain Ryuto Kiryu. That's right, a great villain. He really was a great villain. Compared to the last time when Yun-Yen walked into the school with that scumbag, this incident was obviously much more serious. After all, everyone knew that Yun-Yen was kind and amiable. It wasn't too hard to imagine that she would suddenly become merciful and willingly walk into the school with Ryuto. Although the probability was low, it didn't mean that it was impossible. But who was Kanzaki Colored Glaze? This second-year school beauty wasn't an amiable goddess like Yun-Yen. Instead, she was a well-known cold-faced lady. She was like a snow lotus on a tall mountain. She could be admired from afar, but couldn't be touched. Because Colored Glaze's aura was too strong, the difference between her and a normal high school student was too great. It was to the point that no boy dared to confess to her. At most, they only dared to take her picture and worship her like a god. But how did this iceberg snow lotus end up with Tong Shanglongdo, that super invincible scoundrel? And she was even helping him fix his tie at the school gate? And she was smiling like a girl in love? Impossible. Definitely impossible. How could Kanzaki Ruri possibly like that damn hooligan? She must have been drugged, or poisoned, or under some sort of spell. Ryuto Kiryu must have used some despicable method to change the lady's mind. Or he must have cooked rice for her, cooked rice again, 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 cooked rice for the lady until she became stupid. The Fall of the Lady and Yellow Hair. Many people were already guessing on the forum how Colored Glaze was trained by Ryuto, how she lost herself, and how she became a doll in the end. It was obvious what kind of things were in the minds of the students in this school. They must have watched a lot of movies that required 2 or 3 people to act out. As more and more people joined in on this topic, the smell of gunpowder on First High's BBS became more and more intense. Finally, a post titled, First High's Students Call. Work Together. Kill Ryuto Kiryu was pushed to the front page, and it received thousands of responses within 10 minutes. The Karate Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Kendo Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Judo Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Boxing Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Wrestling Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Rugby Club is here to participate in the crusade. The Shujinshi Club is here to participate in the crusade. Under this post calling for a concerted crusade against Ryuto, almost all the sports clubs in the school participated in it. Although there were some strange clubs that participated, most of them were martial arts clubs. Although Dori No. 1 High School was a school for students, the strength of the clubs in it was also quite strong. For example, the Karate Club and the Judo Club often won the national high school competition. As soon as the post came out, almost all the departments were ready to participate in this crusade. They vowed that they would never allow Long Do to be so arrogant as to harm the school beauties. They vowed to fight this extreme hooligan to the end. However, after seeing the post on First High's BBS, Ryuto, who was eating in the garden during lunch break, couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. These guys are too funny. Although there were hundreds of department members who signed up, Ryuto's laughter was still very rampant, as if he didn't put the hundreds of martial arts students in his eyes. Of course, this was indeed the case. The so-called martial arts students in high school, to put it bluntly, was a group of karate, judo, and boxing enthusiasts. They were far from the level of professionals. The current Ryuto was someone who fought his way out of being hunted by the entire underground world. For these martial arts students in high school, even if there were hundreds of them, they would only end up with corpses everywhere. Ants were ants. Lions were lions. If there were tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of ants, it might be possible to kill a lion, but a few hundred ants. It wouldn't even be enough to fill the gap between a lion's teeth. Colored Glaze, who was sitting opposite him eating, naturally understood this principle, so she wasn't worried about Ryuto at all. Instead, she was worried about the group of idiots who were prepared to cause trouble, worried that too many of them would die. Those idiots. I was just in the mood to help Ryuto tidy up his tie. Was there a need to make such a big fuss? However, he had always been stirring up public anger. But even so, Colored Glaze still said to Ryuto next to her, "They're just a group of kids, it's fine if they make a fuss." "You're not really going to argue with them, are you?" "I don't plan to argue, but the problem is that they don't want to let me go." "Then I'll go talk to them. It won't be good for anyone if a fight really breaks out." "Please don't, this is my business. How can I let you deal with it? You're not my wife for the time being." "You don't have to say the last sentence. What do you plan to do now?" "Fighting in school is definitely not allowed. The impact will be very bad." "Of course I won't fight with them. In fact, I plan to hold a Dori No. 1 martial arts tournament, in the form of a competition. Wouldn't that be much friendlier?" Dori No. 1 martial arts tournament? When they heard the name that sounded like it came out of a comic book, Colored Glaze and Dancing Costume couldn't help but look at each other. However, after listening to Ryuto's explanation, they were even more stunned. The Dori No. 1 martial arts tournament will be held in the school's gymnasium this afternoon. A series of fascinating martial arts tournaments will be held in a friendly, harmonious, and relaxed atmosphere. Tournament Party A. Ryuto Kiryu. Tournament Party B. All the registered participants. The rules of the tournament. Party B is free to challenge Party A. There is no limit to the number of participants. Participation method. Participants need to pay a registration fee of 10,000 yuan, and spectators need to pay a viewing fee of 1,000 yuan. When Ryuto finished writing the Dori No. 1 martial arts tournament competition poster, he added a line below, "Come and fight with Ryuto Kiryu happily, I'll be waiting for you." He also drew a cute cartoon figure on it. Because there were too many things to complain about in this tournament, even the king of complaints like colored glaze didn't know where to start. "Bro, they're here to seek revenge on you, and you want to collect money? That's too much, isn't it? Do you only care about money?" But no matter what, compared to the crusade organized by the clubs, Ryuto's tournament seemed more harmonious. At least in this kind of competition, they didn't have to worry about those idiots being beaten to a bloody pulp by Ryuto. It was much safer than a big battle royale. Therefore, when the lunch break ended, Ryuto's relaxing extracurricular activities proposal was submitted to the principal's office. Chapter 180. Regarding the chaos that started this morning, the school was also having a headache. After all, judging from the situation of the students, they were all agitated by Tongshang Ryudu. It was possible that he would be beaten up by countless righteous people as soon as school was over. In order to prevent the worst from happening, the school even prepared to call the police to escort Ryuto home. Unexpectedly, Long Do actually took the initiative to submit an application form for an after-class activity. Not long after, in the principal's office of the first high school, two figures were facing each other across a desk. Standing on the inner side of the table was the principal, Adolphe Pescarolo, who matched his suit and red wine glass very well. One could tell at a glance that he was an old gentleman. "Toshio, are you serious?" Looking at the application form, the old principal's eyes widened in disbelief. "Of course, don't you know what kind of environment this is? Instead of having a chaotic fight, it's better to let them vent their emotions in an orderly manner." "That doesn't sound like something you would say. But holding a martial arts tournament in school is somewhat risky." "You mean there's no risk if we let them do whatever they want? Someone will die." When Ryuto said the last four words, his tone slightly paused. Obviously, the person he said would die was not himself. Sigh. "That's true." The old principal couldn't help but sigh as he looked deeply at Ryuto. Of course, he knew what kind of person Ryuto Kiryu was, and he also knew about the kid's family background. If the students really attacked Ryuto together, he didn't know if there would be any problems, but the students who attacked would definitely be in big trouble. "Then we'll hold a competition like this, but I'll have to find a security company to take care of the security." "Security company? No need, I'll introduce you to one. I guarantee they'll be strong and cheap." When he heard the old principal say that he wanted to find a security company, Ryuto's eyes suddenly widened as he found another way to make money. For Ryuto, money was something that could never be too much. Moreover, he wouldn't hesitate to make money. Therefore, after Ryuto made a call, the Rulong Security Company rushed to Dori First High School. With the help of this group of veterans, they quickly transformed the basketball court in the middle of the stadium into a shape similar to a ring, and arranged the thousands of seats around it properly. More than 100 bodyguards from the Rulong Security Company were waiting quietly inside and outside the stadium, waiting for the group of saltwater fishes who were coming to pay the money to compete. After connecting with the school skyline, Ryuto logged into the First High School BBS, and used the account he had just applied for to post a post that instantly blew up the entire campus. Title of the post: "Hello everyone, I'm Ryuto Kiryu. If you're my brother, come and kill me. I'll be waiting for you at the first martial arts tournament." The content of the post was roughly that the first martial arts tournament had received the school support and was in full swing preparations. It would be announced to everyone after school in the afternoon and so on. Sure enough, as soon as the post was posted, it was flooded with angry students. King Ryuto Kiryu actually dared to open a first martial arts tournament? And the most annoying thing is that you still want to collect money? We're looking for you to take revenge. You want to earn this little bit of money? That's too disgusting. Although $1,000 to watch the competition and $10,000 to participate in the competition were nothing to the students of this high school, the thought that the money might end up in Long Do's pocket made everyone furious. I want to beat him up. This money will be his medical expenses. No, 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 let's just beat him to death. This money will be his funeral expenses. How much does that bastard look down on people? He actually wants to use this matter to make money? No, I have to call my cousin. He's a professional boxer. He must beat that bastard to death. Suddenly, the students on the forum became even angrier. Some of them even began to contact external aid. In any case, this first martial arts tournament did not say that only students from the school could participate. Just like this, under such a turbulent situation, time slowly passed and it was after school. Ring, 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 ring. As the school bell rang, almost all the students rushed out of the classroom like the cafeteria was opening for lunch. They all rushed toward the gymnasium. Although everyone was very dissatisfied with the fact that they had to pay to watch this tournament, they still had to watch it. Moreover, although it was said that they had to pay, many people had already discussed it for a while. Everyone would squeeze in and see who could take the money. If I don't pay, what can you do? However, just as everyone arrived at the entrance of the gymnasium, a few brawny men in suits stopped them at the entrance. The spectator fee is 1,000 yuan. Pay up and enter. If you don't, scram. In front of thousands of students, the brawny man in a suit holding a loudspeaker at the entrance said mercilessly, as if he did not treat this group of little guys as human beings at all. Nonsense, this is a member of the Rulong Security Company. He originally came from Extreme Dao. Why would he be afraid of you little guys? Try to squeeze in if you have the ability. How about? Let's pay the money? Anyway, it's not much. Just when the group of people were at a loss at the entrance, someone finally couldn't help but pay the money first and walk in. Then, almost everyone began to line up to pay, and then walked into the gymnasium obediently, not daring to make a fuss. As for the other group of people who signed up for the tournament, after paying 10,000 yuan from another entrance, they directly entered the contestant lounge. They warmed up and exercised inside, ready to go out and teach that bastard a lesson at any time. Wow, is it finally going to start? The contestants in the contestant lounge look so powerful. They can be written into my novel. When more and more people entered the gymnasium, Yun Yen, who was sitting in the main spectator stand, couldn't help but clap her hands excitedly. She didn't seem nervous at all. They're just a bunch of idiots. They actually want to make a move on Ryuto. They're simply looking for their own deaths. Dunia, who was also sitting in the main spectator stand, complained with a sour expression. After all, she knew what kind of level Ryuto was at. Even if everyone here worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. Apart from Yun Yen and Dunia, there was only a total of 3 seats in the main spectator stand. The last person sitting in the main spectator stand was naturally the female protagonist of this incident, Kanzaki Colored Glaze. The main spectator stand was located in the area closest to the ring. The ordinary spectators could also see the 3 great beauties sitting side by side. It could be said that just seeing this scene alone was worth the ticket price. However, when Dunia and Colored Glaze sat together, the two naturally wouldn't get along well. So Dunia looked at Colored Glaze, who was sitting leisurely, and asked in a sarcastic tone, "Kanzaki-senpai, by the way, what's wrong with you this morning? Why did you do that kind of thing to Ryuto? Look, you've angered everyone." "What kind of thing? Helping him fix his necktie?" "Actually, that was his strong request." "There's no other way. Who told Ryuto to like me so much?" After hearing Dunia's words, Colored Glaze didn't even turn her head and ridiculed her. "You sneaky cat, stinky mistress. You actually have the nerve to say such a lie. Watch your words. You didn't admit that you're his fiancé, right? Then what does it matter to you who Ryuto is with? What qualifications do you have to call me a mistress? You. If you're really his fiancé, then watch your fiancé closely. It's best to sleep in the same bed with him at night. But with your figure, Ryuto probably won't be interested." Speaking of this, Colored Glaze looked at Dunia's chest with contempt and couldn't help but sneer disdainfully. Speaking of which, Colored Glaze's chest wasn't very big, but at least compared to Dunia's chest, it was a relatively normal size, so she could still laugh at her. "I'll kill you, bastard sneaky cat. Alright, each of you should stop talking. Please." Suddenly, Yun Yen, who was sitting between the two, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She blocked Dunia and turned her head to Colored Glaze. While the three beauties were fooling around on the main viewing platform, most of the spectators had already arrived. Narukai Otani, who was wearing a fancy suit, held a microphone and walked onto the ring. He came to the middle of the ring and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, the first martial arts tournament is about to begin. Now, let's welcome the first challenger, the friend of the uncle of the head of the boxing club, J.K. Smith." Under Narukai's enthusiastic introduction, a big black man wearing boxing shorts and bulging muscles, who looked like a professional, walked onto the ring. What the hell is this? Isn't this an active heavyweight boxer? When they saw J.K. Smith, most of the audience was shocked, but a few people recognized his identity. Isn't this a fight between students? Why is the first person to fight Ryuto a professional boxer? What the hell is the friend of the head of the boxing club? At the same time, the head of the boxing club, Kamida, who was watching the live broadcast in the contestant lounge, suddenly sneered, He, this is called all's fair in war. You're so sneaky, you actually call for outside help, and this level of outside help, won't that kid be beaten to death? That's right, if you find someone to beat him to the ground, what are we fighting for? We've already spent the money, you should let us go up and beat him up." For a moment, the other people in the players' lounge also laughed loudly as they watched the live broadcast. It was as if they could see Long Do being beaten to a pulp by this professional heavyweight boxer. Chapter 181. Indeed, everyone knew that Ryuto Kiryu was the extreme Dao young master, so he must be very good at fighting. Not many ordinary high school students would be able to exchange blows with him. Everyone knew that. But what did it mean to be an active heavyweight boxer? Even if he stood there and let Ryuto hit him, a teenager would not be able to hurt him. The two of them were not on the same level at all. No, this match should not be able to continue, right? The host will definitely call for a stop. Seeing J.K. Smith enter the ring, the audience below the stage stared at the gorgeously dressed Narukai Otani. They all thought that he would definitely stop the match. Who knew that Narukai did not even look at the heavyweight boxer? Instead, he waved his hand to the side and shouted excitedly, "Next, let's welcome the champion of the Kyoto First Martial Arts Tournament. Eternal God, Ryuto Kiryu, enter the stage." Clatter, 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 clatter. Clap, 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 clap. For a moment, a tsunami of applause and cheers filled the entire stadium. If one looked closely, this time the cheers and applause were not from ordinary students, but the security personnel of the Rulong Security Company. Although there were only a few hundred people, their momentum, voice, and applause seemed to be louder and more energetic than the thousands of audience here. It was a strong shock. But for the ordinary audience, it was not the momentum that shocked them, but, is Ryuto really going to fight? They watched as Long Do, who was wearing an ordinary school uniform, walked towards J.K. Smith in the ring without any regard for his family. Most of the people in the audience were extremely surprised. After all, no one dared to believe that Ryuto Kiryu did not have any opinions about his opponent. What's going on? Is he looking for death? This match is obviously not right. Why won't he stop it? At this time, most of the audience could not help but think so. Generally speaking, the Kyoto First Martial Arts Tournament should be limited to the entire school, right? But the boxing department invited an active heavyweight boxer to be their external aide. How could this be? It felt like a certain school had organized a football match, and someone had invited the Brazilian team to play on their behalf. What was the point of competing? However, most people's surprised gazes did not affect Ryuto at all. He leisurely walked up to J.K. Smith. When the two of them stood close to each other, the difference in physique was even more obvious. J.K. Smith was a heavyweight boxer, with a height of 1.98 meters and a weight of nearly 100 kilograms. In comparison, the 16-year-old Ryuto Kiryu was not short, but his overall figure was like a child compared to J.K. Smith. An adult beating a child. At least on the surface, this was the feeling that both sides gave off. Was it him? This little brat actually needs me to take action. This money is really easy to earn. Looking at the high school kid standing in front of him, J.K. Smith couldn't help but grin, revealing his neat white teeth. At this moment, Narrate raised his hand and shouted, "The contestants are ready. The competition begins." Was it really going to start? Ryuto Kiryu was really going to fight that heavyweight boxer. The moment the competition began, J.K. Smith began to shake his body as if he was in a boxing match. He walked towards Ryuto with a mesmerizing smile on his face, and at the same time made provocative gestures with both hands. Not only that, he also said in perfect English, "Stinky brat, if you get out of the ring now, I'll let you live. How about it? Ha ha ha." And Ryuto did not react to this provocative words. Of course, the biggest reason was that he did not understand English. "What are you blabbering on about, idiot? Do I even understand?" Because he did not understand, Ryuto made an international gesture of contempt. He raised one hand, pointed his middle finger at J.K. Smith. "This stinky brat is looking for death. Watch me beat his brains out." Seeing that Ryuto still dared to be arrogant in front of him, J.K. Smith took a step forward. A right straight punch covered in anger fiercely hit Ryuto's head. As a heavyweight professional boxer, J.K. Smith naturally wore boxing gloves on the stage. The fist with the boxing gloves was like lightning, and it was like a small mountain smashing towards the opponent's head. A punch from a heavyweight boxer was enough to kill a person if it hit the head. It was already at the level of a lethal weapon. However, before the audience could exclaim in surprise, Ryuto made his move first. His gaze sharpened, and his right elbow quickly swung out, hitting the center of J.K. Smith's fist. Gotcha! The moment the two collided, J.K. Smith heard a familiar sound of bones exploding. At the same time, the boxing gloves on his hand, along with the 5 fingers inside, burst open. There was a saying in the ancient martial arts world, "It's better to take 10 punches than 1 elbow." With Ryuto's current LV4 physique, and his proficiency in ancient Bajikwan, his elbow actually broke J.K. Smith's fist on the spot. Before the intense pain could reach his brain, another hand like an iron clamp had already grabbed this blockhead's neck, and picked him up like picking up a rag from the ground. The next moment, Ryuto twisted his body, clasped J.K. Smith's neck, and threw him out of the ring not far away. His 1.98-meter tall body, which weighed close to 100 kilograms, flew across the sky. Like a dummy that was thrown out, it flew a distance of 4 to 5 meters, and with a plop, it landed outside the center ring of the stadium. When J.K. Smith fell to the ground, this heavyweight boxer had already lost consciousness, and fainted with white foam coming out of his mouth. That was not the worst part. Anyone with a little bit of medical knowledge would know that his boxing career had come to an end when they saw this guy's fist, which was twisted into a weird shape with his gloves. Seeing the first challenger fly down in the blink of an eye, the entire stadium became extremely quiet, as if they had arrived at a funeral house. How is this possible? This is an active heavyweight boxer. How could he be defeated in an instant? Although everyone knew that Ryuto was very fierce in fighting, they did not expect him to be fierce to this extent. What kind of monster is he to defeat a professional heavyweight boxer at the age of a high school student? However, as the host, Narrate did not react to this shocking scene, but continued to shout, "The first challenger has been declared defeated. Next, let us welcome the second challenger, the head of the boxing department, Kamita Coward." "What? It's my turn? It's my turn?" When he heard the host's words, the head of the boxing department, who was watching in the resting area, suddenly shuddered. More than 10 seconds ago, he had proudly said, "I originally wanted to be the first one to fight, but he's a student of our school after all. I don't feel good hitting him, so I asked J.K. Smith to help me punish him." But when he realized that he was really going to fight, Kamita Coward's legs started to tremble violently. A member of the boxing department beside him also trembled and came to his side, and said with a bitter smile, "Head, it's your turn, do your best." "Do my best? Do my best, you said it so easily, go fight that monster yourself, bastard." After trembling for a second, Kamita Coward said to the staff not far away, "Sorry, my stomach doesn't feel well, I can't fight today, I want to forfeit." The staff looked at him and said coldly, "It's your choice to forfeit, since that's the case, the third challenger, the head of the karate department, Kota Inuya, will fight." "Ah. My stomach also hurts, I want to forfeit too." When he heard his name being called, the head of the karate department, Kota Inuya, also held his stomach and made a "my stomach hurts. It hurts. Look." It was obvious that the disease here had already shown signs of being transmitted from person to person. After Kamita Coward and Kota Inu Barking took the lead, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and so on, all of the other challengers also refused to fight, citing various illnesses as reasons. There were many symptoms, not only stomach pain, but also cold, fever, headache, brain fever, bone fracture, cancer, AIDS, paranoia, and so on. It gave people the feeling that this wasn't a resting area, but a hospital's intensive care unit. Good Lord, there aren't many healthy people in the Dodori First High School, right? Whoever's name is called will get sick. Are you holding a ward meeting here? Naturally, the Rulon Group, as a member of the Tokyo Okichi organization, also had its own room in the Star Python apartment, as well as its own management. I see, there's such a special place in Tokyo. After hearing Fujiki's explanation, Ryuto felt like he had seen a new world. That's right. The reason why Akaragawa invited you to the banquet is because he has something to discuss. You're not the only one that he invited. Oh. The other extreme Tao organizations are also invited? As far as I know, Psychedelic Saburo, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance, these three large extreme Tao organizations in Tokyo, all received similar letters today. In other words, the president of the White Tiger Gang didn't just invite Ryuto, but also the other 4 extreme Tao leaders in Tokyo. The president of the White Tiger Gang, the hero Akaragawa. I think I've heard of his name before. He seems to be a person that is respected by his brothers? Of course, if our leader Kazuma isn't here, he would be the #1 hero in Tokyo. He's a very simple and loyal extreme Tao. Speaking until here, Fujiki handed over the information he had on Akaragawa. Ryuto took the information and looked at it. This guy was already more than 70 years old. He was like a living fossil in extreme Tao. Since the 60s and 70s, Akaragawa started to make a living at the docks, helping the Americans to move goods. At that time, due to the tension between labor and management, it was difficult to transport goods. Japanese gangsters took the opportunity to fill the gap and help the Americans to transport goods. At the same time, the government also used extreme Tao to suppress dissidents, which gave extreme Tao organizations the best soil to take root. After many years of development, the group of extreme Tao people formed many famous extreme Tao organizations, including the hero Akaragawa. With his seniority in extreme Tao, Akaragawa's White Tiger Gang became more and more prosperous. However, they usually followed the rules and never bullied the weak. They also didn't involve themselves in some terrible industries. It could be said that they had their own principles. Therefore, it proved that the president of the White Tiger Gang was respected by all parties in the underworld. It could be said that hundreds of people responded to his call. However, after Ryuto finished reading the information, he said with disdain, "Tesuke, isn't he just a lackey of the government? How shameless of him to call himself a hero." It can't be helped. Extreme Tao in that era was like that. However, Akaragawa didn't get involved with the government anymore. Instead, he focused on helping the weak. Is it true? I feel like there's something wrong with this old man. Although Fujiki also respected the president of the White Tiger Gang, Ryuto looked at the information in his hand and felt that something was wrong. He knew that the earliest extreme Tao was actually a lackey of the politicians. They helped the politicians do things that were inconvenient on the surface. Therefore, they were called the politician's chamber pot. Although there were also extreme Tao like Ikema who didn't rely on the politicians and were upright people, they were relatively few after all. Most of the extreme Tao were always inseparable from the game of money and power. What made Ryuto puzzled was why the White Tiger Gang invited him to a banquet at this time. Just yesterday, the great search for young criminals had just been launched in Tokyo, which made most of the ghetto and similar organizations suffer greatly. Today, the White Tiger Gang sent someone to invite Ryuto. This made people feel that a storm was coming. In fact, it was indeed the case. The current situation was indeed a storm. When Ryuto decided to see what the president of the Akaragawa was doing, a meeting in the car also began. Around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the hero Akaragawa came alone to a small shopping mall that looked inconspicuous. He was an old man wearing an old striped suit and a hat. He looked a little thin. Even from afar, one could feel the hardcore aura of the Showa era. After walking around the mall a few times, the old president passed by a boutique and left from the back door of the shop without saying a word. He followed a small path and walked directly into a deep alley. In the deepest part of the alley, there was a black car that looked inconspicuous. Before the old president walked in, the back door of the car opened by itself and welcomed him in. The car closed, started, and began to drive around the neighborhood. The driving speed wasn't too fast, just enough for the two people sitting in the back seat to talk easily. In addition to the president of the Akaragawa who just got in the car, there was also a woman in a black kimono sitting in the back. Her face was covered with a black veil. At first glance, her face couldn't be seen clearly, but from her figure, she should be very young. After the car drove away, the woman asked faintly, "President Akaragawa, how have you been?" Thanks to you, it's not bad." As the president of the Akaragawa answered, he lowered his head slightly and put on a very humble appearance. It was clear that he was at an absolute disadvantage in front of this woman. This woman's identity was obvious. "The invitations that I asked you to send out have been sent out, right?" "The other 4 have received them and have replied that they are willing to come." "Very good." The woman nodded and said with a cold smile, "As long as the Hero Alliance is 10% successful, the entire Tokyo's extreme Tao will be under your control, President Akaragawa." "I wouldn't dare. It should be under your control." Speaking to this point, the president of the Akaragawa hurriedly lowered his head, as if he felt that this woman was very terrifying. It was hard to imagine that an old man who was known as a hero in the extreme Tao would bow to such a young woman. None of the members of the White Tiger Gang had seen the president of the Akaragawa like this before, not even his own son. After the two of them talked about some more details, the president of the Akaragawa couldn't help but ask, "You asked me to help you find the criminals who robbed and beat up your nephew, but we still haven't found them. What do you think?" "That doesn't matter. If we can find them, then we'll find them. If we can't, then so be it. It's not that important anyway. After all, the Tokyo Extreme Tao have been stirred up." "That's the key." "I see. In that case, they'll be more inclined to agree to our alliance." "My lord, you're truly far-sighted. There's no need to flatter me. The key is to do your job well. Go." "Yes." After the woman said this, the car stopped. The president of the Akaragawa hurriedly got off and hurriedly rushed off into the distance. He was like an old dog that had been ordered by its owner to hunt. Looking at his back, the woman in the car smiled happily. "Akaragawa, after the Extreme Tao Alliance is established, you'll be of little use to us. You want to change your identity after everything is over and take your family to American to retire? Heh, you're dreaming. You want to clear your name after doing so many good deeds? When the time comes, your entire family will be fed to the fishes in the Tokyo Bay's river. Idiot." After leaving behind a cold gaze, the black car slowly drove away from this area as if it had never appeared. Chapter 183. That night, on a relatively remote street in Tokyo, two patrol officers in police uniforms were patrolling the street as usual. However, compared to these two weak patrolmen, the group of people walking nearby, who were either dressed in black, tight-fitting clothes, or dressed sloppily, were much more imposing. Wow, if you look carefully, there are a lot of ghetto on this street. After walking for a while, the young patrol officer on the left couldn't help but say so. This street is an area sandwiched between several ghetto disaster areas. People from various gangs will appear here. It can be said to be Ghetto Street, but the task of patrolling here is quite easy. The patrol officer on the right, who looked older, shook his head and said in a relaxed tone, "Easy? Why is it easy?" "Because there is an unspoken rule on this street. Gangs can't make trouble here. Even if there is a dispute, they can only use their fists and can't use any weapons. Otherwise, they will be attacked by the ghetto world." "Oh, I see. They have such a rule. There is an apartment over there. It looks quite harmonious." As they walked, the young patrol officer looked at the seemingly ordinary apartment in the middle of the street and couldn't help but reach out and point there. It was a 20-story, ordinary-looking residential apartment. Because it was already night time, there were sparkling lights all over the place. "Idiot! Don't point your finger." But at this moment, the older patrol officer reached out and pressed down the young man's hand, hurriedly pressing him down. What's wrong?" "That is the Star Python apartment. It is a place bought and managed by many ghetto leaders in Tokyo. All ghetto members live there. It is a completely lawless area. You can't just point at it." When the Star Python apartment was mentioned, a drop of cold sweat fell from the old patrol officer's forehead. Anyone who had stayed on this street would know how terrifying the Star Python apartment was. There were more than 4 digits of ghetto members living in this apartment all year round. They were from the Rulon Group, White Tiger Gang, Psychedelic Saburo, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance. Therefore, it was not as simple as a mix of crooks and honest folk. It was a complete underground world. The patrolmen working in the surrounding area all knew that no matter what happened, they should never enter the Star Python apartment. This was because once they entered, there was no guarantee that they would be able to walk out alive. What a terrifying place. Just as the young patrolman who had just been transferred here was trembling as he looked at the Star Python apartment, the old patrolman's eyes widened slightly as he looked at the vehicles near the apartment. Was it my imagination? Why do I feel like there are a lot of cars around the apartment today? According to the experience of the old patrol officer, there shouldn't be so many cars parked near the apartment every day, but today, it was already full. However, this was to be expected. After all, in room 408 of the Star Python apartment, which was also the private room of the White Tiger Gang's president, Akane Arakawa, a grand banquet of the extreme path world was slowly unfolding. As the host of tonight's banquet, Karakawa Tsunori had already changed into a majestic kimono and was waiting in the room. The interior of the room was very simple. Other than a round table and 6 seats in the middle, there were basically no decorations. The decoration of such a spacious room was mainly to prevent certain people from installing some bugs or pinhole cameras in the room. After all, what was about to happen here was not a conversation that could be seen in the light of day. Creak. As the room door was forcefully pushed open, a pair of very hip-hop-looking young brothers walked in. Of the 2 men, one was tall and fat, the other was short and thin. Both of them wore sunglasses, very trendy oversized t-shirts and shorts, and their hair was combed into a very stylish hairstyle. At first glance, they looked like hip-hop people. When the 2 young men walked into the room, Karakawa Tsunori smiled and greeted, "Brother Sanlang, long time no see." "That's for sure. At the very least, it'll take half a year." "President Karakawa, you're old and healthy. You're not poked by needles, pfft." Compared to Karakawa Tsunori's formal greeting, the Sanlang brothers replied with a very messy, rap-style speech. However, the 2 brothers' rap did not rhyme at all, and it sounded very bad. It felt like there was something wrong with their heads. In fact, that was indeed the case. As the bosses of the extreme gang, Psychedelic Sanlang, that mainly sold anesthetics, the 2 brothers' hobby was to eat all kinds of trendy pills. It was impossible to say that there was nothing wrong with their heads. After the two bosses of Psychedelic San Lang took their seats, a very mature and beautiful woman in an evening gown walked in right after. This woman looked about 30 years old, which was the age to fully emit the charm of a woman. Coupled with her decent evening gown and obviously well-groomed appearance, she looked as eye-catching as a celebrity or model. If there was no special introduction, perhaps no one would have thought that such a beautiful woman was the leader of the Triad Syndicate that mainly operated nightclubs and sold strange videotapes, Tessa. Tessa's facial features were clearly different from East Asians. She had a strong South Asian style. She should be a woman from Thailand. Probably a woman. After coming in, Tessa smiled and greeted with a hoarse voice, "President Karakawa, it's great to see that you're still so healthy." "Thank you, Ms. Tessa. Please sit." After nodding and inviting Ms. Tessa to sit in another seat, the fourth member of the meeting finally arrived. Different from the previous three, the fourth middle-aged man who came in did not greet anyone in the room. Instead, he looked at the people around the table, nodded slightly, and walked to his seat. He looked about 40 years old, and his determined face was full of hardships. He gave people the feeling that he had been through a lot. One look and you could tell that he was a very reliable man. Of course, whether or not this man named Kai Yang and his Big Dipper alliance were reliable depended on whether or not the money you prepared was enough. If you have enough money, this man from a neighboring country will sell you all the guns and equipment he collected from all over the world. Otherwise, get out of my sight. At this moment, the leaders of the four extreme path organizations had gathered together. White Tiger Society, Psychedelic Saburo, Triad Syndicate, and Big Dipper Alliance. These four extreme dojos were all veterans in the Tokyo area. They were also big shots in the underground society who could cause an earthquake with a single move. But after waiting for a while, the last participant still hadn't arrived, which made the Saburo brothers a little unhappy. "There's still one person left. That kid is the youngest, so he should be the first to arrive." "Courtesy. No. Maybe he's scared and doesn't dare to come. After all, he's just a little brat." While waiting, the San Lang brothers began to mock the last participant one after another. From their tone and words, it was clear that the two brothers didn't think highly of the young master of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryo. "Don't say that." Hearing that, Tessa smiled and said, "Previously, he managed to escape from being hunted down by the entire underground world. Furthermore, you all know that he easily defeated a heavyweight boxer yesterday. He's not as simple as an ordinary kid." Naturally, the four extreme grade leaders knew the details of Tong Shanglong Do's deeds. Not long ago, during the night of the pursuit, some of their subordinates also participated in the pursuit of Ryuto and Dunya. After all, it was a huge sum of 1 billion, who wouldn't want to make money? From the previous night of the pursuit, Ryuto Kiryo was indeed very terrifying. At the age of 16, he was able to lead a little girl and kill hundreds of hunters of the underground world. This wasn't just a rumor of bravery that was spread around on the streets. It was a fact. Therefore, very few people dared to look down on Ryuto. He really wasn't a normal 16-year-old brat. But even so, the Saburo brothers still snorted and said, "He's really good at fighting, but unfortunately, he doesn't know the rules. In the underworld, fighting isn't enough." That's right, that's right. As a junior, he actually dared to be late. He has no respect for us seniors. F***CK. Creak. But just as the Saburo brothers were mercilessly mocking and cursing Ryuto, the door of the room was finally opened again. Under everyone's different gazes, Ryuto, who was wearing a very handsome and dignified suit, slowly walked toward the round table. Today's Ryuto was obviously different from usual. Because he was going to attend a formal occasion, he wore a three-piece business suit made of silk and satin. Compared to wool, silk and satin were more noble and luxurious. Together with the wide collar and cross tie, it could create a three-dimensional feeling of facial features, making him look more robust and stable. With this kind of dressing and his strong aura, Ryuto didn't look like a 16-year-old high school student at all. He even looked like a super big boss that could suppress the 4 extreme bosses. This is Ryuto Kiryu? Is he really only 16 years old? After feeling the terrifying aura of this young man, the rest of the people were shocked by him. But Saburo couldn't help but mutter, "TSK, what's with the pretense?" After hearing Saburo's words, Ryuto, who was walking toward the chair, immediately turned around and came in front of the extreme boss who was wearing a hip-hop outfit. In the room where these extreme bosses were gathered, Ryuto looked at Saburo, who was sitting on the chair with a condescending gaze as if he was looking at trash. At the same time, he asked indifferently, "What did you say just now?" Chapter 184. In fact, Saburo was just casually saying that. He didn't think that Ryuto would actually directly look for him. And from this guy's expression and tone, this young master of the Rulon group seems to be looking for trouble? For a moment, the originally silent atmosphere in the room became even more austere. It was as if even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard clearly. Saburo was stared at by Ryuto's sharp eyes, and a drop of cold sweat fell from his forehead. He had to admit that this guy dressed like a godfather standing in front of him and looking at him with contempt, this feeling was quite intimidating. Especially when he knew that Ryuto Kiryu was a monster with at least hundreds of lives in his hands, this pressure was even more exaggerated. It was simply enough to make people pee their pants. Seeing that Saburo didn't dare to reply, Ryuto stretched out his hand and knocked on the table in front of him. He continued to ask, "I seem to have heard you say something about me. I didn't hear it clearly. Try saying it again?" Although he was momentarily intimidated by Ryuto's imposing manner, Saburo was still the leader of the extreme Tao organization, Psychedelic Saburo. He had more than 1,000 brothers under him. Naturally, he couldn't continue to be bullied like this. So he stood up and said with a fierce tone, "Stinky brat, you're looking for trouble, right? Who's the one looking for trouble, don't you know? Don't look for trouble first and then pretend to be innocent. You're late, so what if we say a few words to you?" Hearing this, Ryuto sneered, then stretched out his hand and patted his suit, mocking, "Is this a kindergarten? You like to be punctual? Then if you're here on time, should I give you a little red flower as a reward? If you hurt your brain from taking drugs, go get it treated. Soaking in these things every day won't end well. Sooner or later, you'll die from eating, stinky devil. You're King tired of living." When Fatty Subaru heard that it was not a sarcastic remark, but an insult directed at his brother's nose, he, who had never been ridiculed like this, suddenly jumped up from his seat. Unlike Pang Sanlang, although Pang Sanlang looked fat, his body was very strong. It could even be said that he was strong to the point of being unnatural. In Psychedelic Saburo, Skinny Saburo was in charge of making all kinds of plans and managing the gang. He was the leader of the Brain faction. Fat Saburo was in charge of killing the enemy. He was the leader of the Fighting faction. This combination of fat and thin was one of the main reasons why the organization had developed to its current state. At this moment, Pang Sanlang was like a leopard hunting its prey as he pounced towards Ryuto, who was not far away. His palm suddenly grabbed the little bastard's head. His widely open palm was like a huge fan, almost able to wrap an adult's head within it. Then, with just a little bit of force, he could crush the skull. Of course, Pang Sanlang's strength was not completely from his innate strength and training. It was also due to the effects of many forbidden drugs. Psychedelic Saburo was in the business of selling drugs. Naturally, he had the means to buy many high-grade steroid drugs and forbidden drugs that could release the human body's limits. Although the side effects of these drugs were huge, Pang Sanlang, who lived on the edge of a knife, naturally did not care about these small matters. Instead, he usually ate all kinds of forbidden drugs as if they were jelly beans. The result of taking medicine like this was that Pang Sanlang's physique, which was already different from ordinary people, became even stronger. He was as strong as an ox, and he once tried to stand after being shot by a pistol 7 or 8 times. He was even able to rush over and crush the gunman's skull. But no matter what, the fact that Do Long and Subaru Long had suddenly started fighting was completely out of line for President Arakawa, who had called for this meeting. "Wait. You guys." Thus, Arakawa hurriedly stood up and wanted to stop the two, but it was all too late. Ryuto, who was attacked, flashed with an even faster speed. In the next moment, his figure appeared 2 meters high in the air. Immediately after, his left hand formed a claw and accurately landed on Pang Sanlang's hand. This scene, at first glance, looked like an eagle hunting its prey, but also like a fierce tiger brandishing its claws. In short, the two people's hands tightly clasped together with 5 fingers. This little bastard's speed is so fast. After Ryuto closed in on him, Pang Sanlang was shocked by his lightning-like movements. But he immediately showed a disdainful smile. "But what's the use of being fast? This idiot actually wants to compete with me in grip strength? Who doesn't know that Pang Sanlang's strength is the strongest in Tokyo? Ah! So painful." Before Pang Sanlang could finish this confident thought in his heart, a voice suddenly rang out. He felt a heart-wrenching pain from his right hand. It was as if someone was using an iron clamp to clamp his bones. In terms of hand strength, how could Pang Sanlang compare with the demon child Sai-Tu from Sai-Tu Guild Hall? Sai-Tu was a genuine martial arts master. His kung fu was unparalleled in the world. His grip strength could crush steel. But even if Sai-Tu had entered the Dao, he still couldn't gain the upper hand when he shook hands with Ryuto in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel not long ago, let alone a mere druggie. This wasn't the end. After squeezing Pang Sanlang's hand until the bones almost broke, Ryuto took the opportunity to flip his hand. Pang Sanlang's wrist was in pain, and he had no choice but to kneel on the ground. Plop! A muffled sound was heard. Under the stunned gaze of everyone in the room, Pang Sanlang's wrist was pressed to the ground. His face showed an expression of extreme pain, but he was almost unable to move. "This won't do, big guy. What's the benefit of taking so many drugs? Other than scaring some trash, if you meet an expert like me, you will be played like a pig." When forcing a big guy to kneel on the ground, Ryuto didn't forget to use a mocking tone to say to him. Seeing that Pang Sanlang was pressed to the point that he couldn't breathe, and Pang Sanlang was shivering, President Arakawa hurriedly said, "Young Master Ryuto, even if you don't give them face, you have to give face to me, the host, right? What's the point of fighting and killing here?" "That's right. What's the point of fighting and killing here? Remember next time, don't make a move on an enemy that you can't beat. Not everyone is as benevolent as me." After hearing President Arakawa's words, Ryuto let go of the big guy in his hand, and then said to the two brothers with a smile, "Beast, beast." After being taught a lesson by Ryuto, the Sanlang brothers could only dejectedly return to their original seats and didn't dare to provoke any more. Hee, I don't remember any grudges between the Rulong group and the psychedelic Sanlang. Although the two brothers' mouths are indeed a bit cheap, but young Master Ryuto doesn't need to be so angry. Just as Ryuto sat down, the leader of the Black Snake Alliance, Tessa, who was sitting next to him, asked with a smile, "There is indeed no grudges, then I just look down on drug sellers." After glancing at the Sanlang brothers, Ryuto seriously said to them, "In the future, if I see your drugs appear in my territory, I will stuff all the drugs and explosives into your nostrils. I will do what I say." Okay, the meeting officially begins. This time, I have something to say to everyone." When Baron Creek saw the Sanlang brothers' flushed faces, he hurriedly sighed and forcefully steered the conversation in the right direction. "Really, why is this Ryuto Kiryu so difficult to deal with? He's simply a madman, he doesn't care about anyone." Originally, according to President Arakawa's idea, Ryuto Kiryu was the youngest among all the leaders here, so he should be the easiest to deal with. After all, the one who sat on the same level as the 4 leaders before was Hitomi Kazuma. Now that Kazuma wasn't in Nippon, a 16-year-old boy shouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Who knew that from the way he looked for a fight as soon as he arrived, this guy was 100 times more arrogant than his father, and he clearly didn't have any respect for these seniors. Sigh. Difficult to deal with. Forget it. I hope he can understand human language. When all the leaders sat at the table, Arakawa said seriously, Regarding the incident that happened in Nippon yesterday, everyone should know about it. Is President Arakawa referring to the incident where the Metropolitan Police Department forced us to hand over the information of our members? After hearing this, Tessa was the first to react, and the other members also understood. Just yesterday afternoon, the Metropolitan Police Department indiscriminately demanded that all the Jigakudo in Tokyo submit and hand over the information of all the young members of their organization. This information included name, age, height, appearance, physique, weight, fingerprints, and so on. It was all very important personal information. This was simply outrageous in the eyes of the extreme do. After all, if so much information was handed over, wouldn't it be very troublesome for the brothers whose information was collected in the future? Would they come to find them if they did something? After all, they were in the side door. How could they hand over such important information to the police? It was simply suicide. But the problem was that the attitude of the Metropolitan Police Department was very strong this time. It was obvious that whoever didn't cooperate, they wouldn't be able to survive in Nippon in the future, even if they had the backing of the emperor. Under this tough attitude that completely ignored the law, the other extreme do were like the Rulon group. They had no choice but to hand over the information of some of their members. Don't you have any thoughts about this situation? How could we not have any thoughts? Bastard police. Hearing President Arakawa's provocative question, the Saburo brothers couldn't help but slap the table. After slapping, Saburo glanced at Ryuto. After seeing that he didn't have any reaction, he said, "Those guys have become more and more excessive in recent years. They simply don't give us a way out. If this continues, no one will be able to survive." Yes, if this continues, the extreme do in the Nippon area, which is us, will gradually be forced to the point of disbanding. President Arakawa, how do you plan to solve this? Ahem, if you trust me, I plan to form a hero alliance. Everyone will unite and fight against the Metropolitan Police Department's despicable methods. Under the conversation of the two, the president of the White Tiger Gang finally revealed his true purpose. Chapter 185. From the very beginning, President Arakawa was very confident about the establishment of the Ranchiar Alliance. After all, at this critical juncture, all the extreme organizations in Tokyo were in a state of panic, and they urgently needed a stabilizing force to stabilize themselves and the mood of the organization. Under such circumstances, I, the famous Ranchiar Alliance, took the initiative to stand up and lead everyone to resist the rude treatment of the Metropolitan Police Department. I was simply like a savior. In addition to this, there was another reason that made Arakawa feel very confident, and that was that Psychedelic Saburo was originally one of them. Although most people didn't know this, even Saburo didn't know. In fact, Psychedelic Saburo and White Tiger Gang were originally under the same boss. Both Arakawa and Saburo had been recruited by that lady long ago, and gradually reached their current position under her support. In other words, among the current 5 Kyoto organizations in Tokyo, 2/5 of the forces were originally one of them. As long as one of the other 3 agreed, the other 2 would be forced to follow. Otherwise, once the Ranchiar Alliance was formed, the organizations that were excluded would be subjected to all kinds of internal and external pressure. Under such circumstances, no organization could withstand it. However, if the Ranchiar Alliance was really formed according to Arakawa's idea, it would indeed reduce a lot of pressure for all the Kyoto organizations present. First of all, because of the formation of the alliance, the members of each Kyoto organization could all be added together, forming a huge force of tens of thousands of people. Under the unified management of this huge force, coupled with a unified allocation of the best team of lawyers, not only could they fight for the greatest right to speak in the dialogue with the Metropolitan Police Department, but they could also maximize the safety of their own industries to the greatest extent. Moreover, for example, the nightclub and videotape industry of the Black Snake Alliance, the anesthetic and forbidden drug industry of the Psychedelic Saburo, the arms sales industry of the Big Dipper Alliance, and so on, were originally mutually beneficial. As long as everyone reached an agreement, these industries could also be interpenetrated. Under the care and support of the Rulon Group and the White Tiger Gang, they could even smoothly reach any corner of the country. At that time, The huge Kyoto alliance from Tokyo would annex the other Kyoto organizations in Japan one by one, and its territory would become bigger and bigger. In the end, it could even sell its own industries overseas. At that time, the monetary benefits that the 5 great extreme Daos could obtain would probably be tens of times more than what they currently had. In other words, what Karakawa Genesis wanted to establish was not just a Ranchiar alliance, but an underground empire. An empire ruled by the extreme Dao, a powerful armed force that even the Metropolitan Police Department couldn't do anything to, and a world-class crocodile that was enough to leave their name in the annals of history. Therefore, when Akane Arakawa expressed his thoughts, there was an uproar around the table. It had to be said that Karakawa Chuang's eloquence was excellent. Moreover, the content of what he said had been carefully arranged. It was easy to listen to it and make one's blood boil. This level of verbal skill was a necessary basic skill for a politician, but there weren't many people who could hone it to this level. Therefore, it seemed that Karakawa Tsunori was particularly trustworthy. Thus, Saburo couldn't help but be so excited that his eyes lit up. He waved his hands and used his sharp voice to shout, "Great! This is exactly what we want! Ha 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 ha!" Indeed. Tessa from the Black Snake Alliance also laughed and said, "In this situation, it would be great if someone could come out and take charge of the situation. After all, my territory is also in trouble." Aha! Indeed. If we can make more money and secure more sales channels, I won't object. The leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang, also nodded and used the simplest words to express his support. Indeed, when Karakawa Tsunori made this suggestion, logically speaking, no one should disagree. After all, there were so many people targeting the extreme Dao out there. If everyone fought on their own, they would be nibbled away one by one. This was especially true for organizations like the Black Snake Alliance and the Big Dipper Alliance, which focused on profit-making. The stricter the laws of the world were, the more disadvantageous it would be for their business. They also needed a strong protective umbrella. Moreover, after forming an alliance, everyone would be able to make tens of times more money. Who wouldn't want to do such a good thing? Of course, thinking about it was just thinking. Whether or not he could actually do it was another matter altogether. Karakawa Tsunori described a huge and beautiful blueprint for everyone present, but he knew that it was just bait to attract these idiots. Just like all professional politicians, when they made some promises, their goal was to get the votes in other people's hands. As for what would happen after they got the votes, who would care? After all, what was done, and it was up to them to explain or not to explain. At that time, as long as the Ranchiar Alliance was formed, Karakawa Tsunori and Saburo would quickly clean up the other 3 extreme Dao with the help of their boss and replace them with their own people. At that time, that person would be the uncrowned king of the entire Japanese underground world. In addition to the forces that she already controlled, it could be said that she could control the existence of this country. Very good. Looks like Tessa and Kai Yang have no problems. Only this kid is left. After hearing Tessa and Kai Yang's support, Karakawa Tsunori smiled in his heart. Then he looked at the only one who didn't say anything, the young master of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryo. Since Karakawa Tsunori expressed his intention to form the Ranchiar Alliance, Ryuto didn't say anything. It wasn't until Karakawa Tsunori looked at him that the young master slowly raised his head. Very good. Ryuto showed a happy smile and clapped. President Karakawa can have such a bold idea and broaden your vision. You are indeed a senior in the underworld. You're too polite. We're all here to make a living. We just want to eat our fill and wear warm clothes. This old man is just taking advantage of the situation. After replying to Ryuto with a smile, Karakawa Tsunori looked at Saburo next to him. Saburo suddenly stood up and said seriously, "But although it's an alliance, we still need a leader. After all, soldiers can't move without a general, and snakes can't move without a leader. Someone needs to be able to coordinate everything. Yo-ho, I didn't expect a drug addict like you to be so cultured. Not bad, not bad. Ahem." Ignoring Longdo's mockery, Subaru continued, "To be the leader of this alliance, you must first have enough experience in this industry. Only then will you be able to convince the masses." Secondly, you must have enough ability to do things well. That's how it should be. Kai Yong nodded. Since that's the case, I'm sure everyone here knows who the leader of the alliance will be, right? At this point, Subaru cast his gaze towards President Arakawa, who was sitting upright and ready to stand up and speak at any moment. That's right, he is. Originally, Saburo stood up and was about to extend his hand to President Arakawa, who was next to him, and invite him out as if he was introducing an award-winning celebrity. But just as Saburo extended his hand, a figure quickly appeared between him and President Karakawa. "Aya, Saburo, you're too polite. I know I'm very good, but there's no need to invite me out with such fanfare." Under everyone's shocked gazes, Ryuto suddenly appeared in front of Saburo and grabbed his hand. Then, he shook it up and down with a smile on his face. At first glance, it seemed like Saburo was going to recommend Ryuto as the leader of the Ranchiar Alliance. When this strange situation occurred, Saburo and Karakawa Tsunori were instantly stunned. Was there a mistake? This kid was too shameless. How could he come out and cut him off? After coming to his senses, Saburo hurriedly shook off Ryuto's hand. He gulped and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, young Master Ryuto. The person I'm talking about isn't you. I'm talking about President Karakawa. Not me." Hearing this, Ryuto squinted his eyes and asked in an unhappy tone, "What were the two conditions you said to be the leader?" "Say it again." "First, you have to have enough experience in this industry. Second, you have to have enough ability. You seem to..." "I don't have experience? I don't have ability?" Suddenly, Ryuto seemed to have heard something unbelievable. He raised his hands and said in a serious tone, "How many years have I been in this industry? At the very least, it should be a few months, right? That's not considered experience? I just beat up your brother. Isn't that ability? A few months? A few months. What the hell are you talking about? And beating up my brother counts as ability?" If it wasn't for the fact that the person who said those words was the willful and overbearing Tong Shang Ryudu, Xiao Saburo really wanted to go up and slap him away. After all, everyone present here was an extreme Dao leader who had been in this business for at least 10 years. There was even an extreme Dao living fossil like Arakawa Chuangzu here. How could someone like Arakawa Chuangzu, who had only been in the dragon battle for a few months, be shameless enough to talk about it? You're really shameless, right? That's right, Ryuto really wasn't shameless. After all, as long as he wasn't shameless, others would be the ones to be embarrassed. This kid, he seems to be trying to cause trouble. Don't tell me he really wants to steal my position as the leader? Seeing Ryuto Kiryu jump out and tease Saburo, who was in charge of being the supporting character, Karakawa Tsunori felt something was amiss. Karakawa Tsunori finally felt that something was amiss, as if the train was about to derail. Chapter 186. This Ranchiar Alliance might not be that important to other people, but to Karakawa, it was his life. This was not a metaphor, but a reality. If Karakawa couldn't complete this mission and gather all of Tokyo's extreme Dao into an extreme Dao alliance and offer them to that person, then this extreme Dao alliance would be destroyed. Then, the life of this extreme Dao living fossil would disappear along with the failure of this mission. He was very clear about this. Karakawa was over 70 years old, but he still didn't want to die. Not only did he not want to die, but he also had a son, a daughter, and a grandson. Karakawa didn't want his family to die. For this Ranchiar Alliance was willing to sacrifice all of Tokyo's extreme Dao without caring about other people's lives. Anyway, I'm doing this for my family, so they should forgive me. Arakawa Tsunori had seen in some movies that no matter how many bad things the villain did in the movie did, as long as he did it for his father, mother, son, or daughter, he would be able to clear his name immediately. Humans were such simple creatures. In other words, sympathy was such a cheap and useful thing. However, compared to clearing his name, Karakawa cared more about his mission. First, he had to complete the Ranchiar Alliance and become the president. Hence, when Baron Chuan saw Long Do suddenly appear to steal the limelight, his gaze instantly sharpened. Sensing Karakawa's anger, Shousaburo hurriedly said, "Young Master Ryuto, I don't care if you want to make fun of me, but you can't joke about being the president." "What?" Ryuto sneered. "You think I'm joking? You think I don't deserve to be the president? You know what you're doing, right?" If Shousaburo had enough confidence, he would have shouted this out, but he didn't dare. Therefore, the leader of the psychedelic trio had no choice but to look at the other two leaders, Tessa of the Black Snake Alliance and Kai Yang of the Big Dipper Alliance, as if he wanted them to say something. In fact, from the very beginning, as long as the real, chivalrous alliance was formed, there was nothing to discuss about the alliance leader. Everyone was well aware of this. Psychedelic San Lang and his brother looked sloppy, so it was hard for them to convince the crowd. Although Miss Tessa from the Black Snake Alliance was capable, she was in the nightclub business and didn't have enough presence. Although Kai Yang from the Big Dipper Alliance had a strong presence, he wasn't good with words and didn't like to communicate with others. As for the Rulon group, if Kazuma Kirishima was still around, he would be qualified to become the leader. However, it was not Kirishima who came, but his son, Ryuto. Please, a 16-year-old kid leading the entire Kyoto in Tokyo and becoming the leader of 10,000 people, no one would believe it. If he really did that, wouldn't the Ranchiar Alliance become a joke? Thus, Shousaburo felt that as long as Kai Yang and Tessa weren't stupid, they would definitely not push the position of leader to Ryuto. And if the two of them wanted to sit in this position, it would be impossible for them to do so under the joint efforts of Shousaburo and Shirakawa Tsunori. It had to be said that Shousaburo's thinking made sense. After being glanced at by him, Tessa couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. "Young Master Ryuto, choosing a leader is a serious matter. It doesn't seem good to make such a ruckus." "Indeed. Also, you guys won't be able to come up with a result. Why don't we use the simplest method, an anonymous vote?" Other than Tessa, Kai Yang, who was sitting at the side, was silent for a while, then he made a very constructive suggestion. "Voting. Since there were 5 people here, whoever felt the most suitable to be the leader could directly write their answer on a piece of paper and vote anonymously. In the end, the person with the most votes would be the leader of the Ranchiar Alliance. All the other members would have to respect him and listen to his orders. What, this guy Kai Yang still knows how to say something nice. After hearing Kai Yang's suggestion, Akaragawa Tsunori quickly said, "Yes, this old man agrees. Not only is this efficient, but it can also avoid gossip." "Voting. Are you sure you want to do this?" Ryuto frowned when he heard this. He put on an unhappy face. "Voting is the fairest way. Young Master Rulon Group, if you don't want to, you don't have to participate." Kai Yang glanced at Ryuto and said in an emotionless tone. And Tessa on the side added, "Yes, and before voting, we have to write a written pledge to prove that we obey the results of this vote and that we absolutely respect the leader's leadership. Otherwise, it would be boring if we don't admit it after voting." "Writing a pledge? That's good." Immediately, Shousaburo also quickly shouted, "I support. If you want to make a living, you have to pay attention to credibility. Write it clearly in black and white and put your fingerprint. I guarantee that no matter what the result is, you can't go back on your words." "That makes sense. Then go get someone to bring paper, pen, and ink." Seeing that things were developing in the direction he wanted to see the most, President Akaragawa also quickly ordered the subordinates waiting outside to prepare paper, pen, and ink. In the world of extreme Tao, as long as the signature and fingerprint were put, it meant that the pledge was effective. If it was violated, it would be a crime of disobedience. The lightest punishment would be cutting off the finger as an apology. After President Huang Chuan picked up a pen and paper and wrote down the formation document of the Ranchiar Alliance, he signed his name and left his handprint first. The document was then passed to everyone's hands. Shousaburo, Tessa, and Kai Yang looked at the document, then signed their names and pressed their fingerprint on it. They all agreed with the content written on the document. When it was Ryuto's turn, he picked up the document and looked at it again and again. He looked very unhappy. "He. Ha 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 ha. Stinky brat, you have nothing to say now. Seeing his unhappy look, Shousaburo couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Now, the Rulon group had a difficult choice in front of them. Ryuto could either choose to vote or leave with a sullen face. However, if Ryuto left, then his Rulon group would definitely be ostracized by the Ranxia Alliance. With all kinds of internal and external troubles, there was no doubt that the Rulon group's future path would be very difficult to walk. Fine, I'll sign it. I'm not afraid of you. After looking at it for a few seconds, Ryuto signed his name and pressed his fingerprint on it. Very good. The fish was in the net and the dog was in the cage. Now it was time to close the net. Then, under the arrangement of President Arakawa, who had a smile on his face, the group members outside brought in a box, a few blank slips of paper, and a ballpoint pen. Now, let's start the voting. No matter who votes, you can't complain about the final result. This is written in black and white. Does anyone have any objections? No. No problem. Let's do it. Humph. Other than Ryuto, who snorted unhappily, the others agreed very quickly. They all turned around and wrote down their candidate for the alliance leader on the slips of paper. The box where the slips of paper were placed was checked by everyone one by one to ensure that there were no traps inside. In other words, the results of this vote would definitely not have any problems with fraud. Great. The mission that the Lord had given them was finally about to be completed. After watching everyone toss their slips of paper into the ballot box, Baron Chuan breathed out a sigh of relief as he tossed the slip of paper with his name into the box. God knew how much pressure he was under in today's meeting. After all, if the alliance failed this time, the result would be very ugly. Arakawa Chuang couldn't lose. He couldn't afford to lose. However, even though Ryuto Kiryu was involved in the process, the final result shouldn't be a problem. After everyone finished voting, Arakawa Chuang said with a smile, "Then let's not waste any more time. As the host, I will count the votes on the spot." Shousaburo quickly said, "Of course, President Arakawa, please." So, Arakawa Chuang turned the box in the center of the table upside down and let the 5 slips of paper fall on the table. He reached out his hand that was so old that his skin was sticking to his bones. He gently picked up one of the slips of paper and opened it in front of the other 4 people. On the first slip of paper, the familiar name, Arakawa Chuang, was written. "It's me. Thank you for your support." After seeing his name, Arakawa Chuang pretended to be surprised and nodded to the other 4 people. Then, he continued to open the second slip of paper. However, the name that came out wasn't his. It was Ryuto Kiryu, in big letters. TSK, this brat actually wants to vote for me. He really doesn't know what he's doing. After putting aside the slip of paper with Ryuto's name, President Arakawa Chuang shook his head and continued to open the third slip of paper. The third slip of paper was very normal. The name Arakawa Chuang was still written on it. That's right. Other than that brat himself, who else would vote for him? However, the president of the White Tiger Gang relaxed and opened the 4th and 5th slips of paper. The names that came out of the 2 slips of paper made this extreme grade living fossil who had been in extreme grade for decades almost pop his eyes out. This was because the last 2 slips of paper had the name Ryuto Kiryu neatly written on them. In other words, it was 3-2. This time, the candidate for the leader of the Ranxia Alliance was Ryu Tongsheng. Chapter 187. After this terrifying result appeared, Akakawa Chuangshe felt his vision go dark and he almost fainted on the spot. How? How is this possible? This? This is impossible? Is there something wrong with my eyes? He quickly put his hand on his forehead and looked at the words on the notes again and again. Akakawa Chuangshe, Ryuto Kiryu. These 2 names did not have a single word that was the same. It was impossible to misread them, and it was even more impossible to miswrite them. Wait. This is not right. This is impossible. This is... Just as President Arakawa was shocked silly by this unexpected scene, Subaru abruptly slammed the table and looked at the other 3 people as if he had seen a ghost. However, when Xiaosaburo looked at Ryuto, Tessa, and Kai Yang, he realized that these three people did not seem to be surprised by this unexpected result at all. Instead, they looked calm. Something's wrong. We've been tricked. These three people must have discussed this beforehand. Xiaosaburo was an old fox who had been in the underworld for more than 10 years. When he saw the expressions of these three people, he already knew what was going on. There were a total of 5 votes. Xiaosaburo and Akakawa Chuangshi naturally voted for the latter. Therefore, only when Ryuto, Tessa, and Kai Yang voted for Ryuto would there be such an unbelievable result. However, from the attitude of the two leaders of the Black Snake Alliance and Big Dipper Alliance towards Ryuto, it was impossible for them to vote for Ryuto. Instead, they had been leaning towards President Akakawa's side. However, the truth was better than guessing. From the final voting results, Tessa and Kai Yang's actions of leaning towards President Akakawa's side were 100% just a performance to fool people. And most importantly, it was actually Kai Yang who proposed the secret vote, and Tessa who proposed the written agreement in advance. These two actions seemed to be helping President Akakawa to stabilize the situation, but in fact, they were digging a hole for the other two to jump into. Voting to resolve this, right? We have 3 people on our side, and you have 2 people on your side. Are you going to vote? Let's see which side has more people in the end. After throwing, you realized that you had been tricked, right? It doesn't matter. The deed of formation of the Ranxiar Alliance has your signatures and fingerprints. Do you want to deny it? Would he still want to work in this industry in the future? In this way, Ryuto played the bad guy, while Tessa and Kai Yang played the good guy. It could be said that Xiaojo Arakawa and Xiaojo Saburo were completely played in the palm of their hands. This wasn't just a case of losing the wife and losing the soldier, but losing the entire family's life. You 3. What a scheme, what a scheme. After noticing this, Subaru couldn't help but point at the 3 extreme Dao leaders who were sitting at the table with a happy and content expression. He simply wished he could grab them and hang them on the spot. What is he talking about? Why don't I understand? Tessa shrugged with a smile, looking innocent. I don't know. Weren't you very keen on voting before? Now that the results were out, what should he do? Can't afford to lose? Kai Yang was even more direct. He clasped his hands together and looked at Subaru with a sharp gaze, as if he dared to say no, he would open a hole in his head. You. Ryuto Kiryu, is this your plan? While Subarang was speechless from these two's retorts, President Huang Chuan, who was almost paralyzed in his chair, slowly raised his head, looking towards that extreme Dao young master whose expression had unknowingly become extremely calm. From the moment Ryuto Kiryu entered this room, he gave off a feeling of brainless and unhappy. He was arrogant and crazy, and his expression was very exaggerated. One look and one could tell that he was a stinky brat without any foundation. But after everything was settled, Ryuto returned to his usual calm expression, making people feel that this guy was even a bit unfathomable. If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. This old saying is very reasonable, right, President Arakawa? At this point, the corners of Long Do's mouth curled up, revealing an expression of, the plan has worked. Indeed, if you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. In this information age, a lot of things couldn't be hidden just because you wanted to. Especially when Ryuto Kiryu had a group of very powerful companions. 1.5 hours ago, Ryuto received a letter from the White Tiger Society. There's definitely something wrong with that guy called Arakawa Soyu. There's probably some conspiracy behind this invitation. After explaining the situation to Colored Glaze said firmly on the phone. Ryuto heard this and asked with some confusion, "Why do you say that?" "I've seen the president of the White Tiger Society at an event before. He's a piece of trash that talks about benevolence and righteousness, but in fact, he's a piece of trash with a belly full of evil tricks." "What kind of hero is he?" When mentioning Arakawa Soyu, Colored Glaze mercilessly scolded him as if she didn't care about that person at all. In fact, that was indeed the case. As the young lady of the Kamiyoshi family, Colored Glaze had seen all kinds of scum since she was young. Anyway, when she walked around those upper-class banquets, she would meet either scum or scum. Therefore, Colored Glaze was very good at identifying scum, and she was also very clear about the relationship between jidaichi and politicians. Before meeting Ryuto, Colored Glaze had always thought that all jidaichi were dogs raised by politicians. They were scum dogs that did some dirty work for the scum that appeared to be working for the people on the surface. The White Tiger Society was obviously this type of scum. Therefore, Arakawa Soyu considered himself as a hero in jidaichi. This kind of stupid words was more than enough to fool people who didn't know the business, but it was impossible to fool Colored Glaze. After that, Ryuto immediately called Sensible and asked Sensible to help check the accounts of Arakawa Soyu and the White Tiger Society. He wanted to see their financial situation. From the information that Sensible found, the White Tiger Society's financial situation was quite good. It was so good that it was very surprising. After all, this organization was the same as the Rulon Group. They were not involved in profiteering industries such as anesthetics, firearms, nightclubs, etc. However, the White Tiger Society was much richer than the Rulon Group. In this era, it was very difficult for a jidaichi who didn't do these dirty jobs to survive. Just look at how poor the Rulon Group was before Ryuto came. Between money and face, one could only choose one. Of course, there was no reason to accept both. However, the White Tiger Society was able to accept both. In particular, their president, Arakawa Soyu, had a very vague financial source. Even Sensible found it very difficult to find out. The accounts that send money to Arakawa Soyu are very complicated. I asked Gao Yuan to probe through his channels. In the end, it pointed to a few non-profit organizations. Non-profit organizations? What's that? It's a type of organization that doesn't belong to any government or established by any country. It's usually defined as a non-profit public welfare organization, such as environmental protection, human rights, and environmental protection. It sounds very high and mighty. It's just a saying. Most of these organizations talk about activism, but in their hearts, they only think about business. Their purpose is either to make money or to mess with people. They have a lot of money behind them. You'd be stupid to believe them. Money behind them. In other words, the person who sent money to that old man is the one behind him? Yes, and this money behind him is also supporting another jidaichi organization called Psychedelic Saburo. Psychedelic Saburo? Wasn't that the trashy jidaichi that sold anesthetics and banned drugs? After hearing this news, Ryuto had a new understanding of Arakawa Soyu. This old man used the name of chivalry to fool people in Tokyo, but he actually had a big money backer behind him. Moreover, he had the same boss as Psychedelic Saburo. What was Psychedelic Saburo? In the words of Mr. Fujiki, it was a complete piece of trash in society. They specialized in selling anesthetics and banned drugs to make huge profits. They were trash that deserved to die 100 times. The White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Saburo had the same power behind them. In that case, there was a reason why President Arakawa called so many jidaichi over for a meeting. 5 jidaichi organizations. 2 of them are one. If the other 3 can't come to an agreement, then the direction of this meeting will be decided by these 2 organizations. At this moment, Colored Glaze suggested, Ryuto, immediately contact the leaders of the Black Snake Alliance and the Big Dipper Alliance. Tell them about the account problems that Sensible and Gao Yuan investigated. Also, ask them to advance and retreat together in this meeting. Is it enough to advance and retreat together? Should we do something else? If I'm not wrong, Arakawa will probably ask for an alliance or something. At this time, we must do this. And do it again. Just like this, under Colored Glaze's arrangement, Ryuto successfully got in touch with Tessa and Kai Yang. After talking for a while, they came to an agreement about this meeting. After all, the leaders of the 2 jidaichi organizations weren't idiots. When they knew that Arakawa and Saburo were one family, they naturally understood why the chivalry alliance was proposed by the two of them. Just as Long Do expected, these two fellows were planning to drag us down with them. Understanding this, Tessa winked at Kai Yang and began the following series of performances. In short, the leader of the Chivalry Alliance is now me. No one has any objections to this, right? After the vote for the leader, Ryuto slowly stood up from his chair and said to the two losers, Arakawa Tsunori and Saburo, with a smile. Without waiting for their reply, Ryuto continued with a smile, of course, no objections. After all, the agreement is here. Whoever dares to object will become the enemy of the entire Jidaichi world. I guarantee in the name of the Chivalry Alliance that they will die a horrible death. Chapter 188. It's over. It's over. After hearing Long Do's arrogant words, Subaru's forehead couldn't help but drip with sweat. Why? Why did it turn out like this? It's us. It's us. We were the ones who plotted against them first. Whether it's the secret collusion, the plan, or the meeting, we were the ones who came first. But why did it turn out like this? Why did we become the ones who were plotted against? Shaosaburo did not expect the situation to turn out like this. What should I do now? The Ranchia Alliance had been formed. Everyone had signed their names and even left their handprints on the formation document. If he went back on his words now, then Psychedelic Saburo and White Tiger Gang would have no place in the entire Extreme Dao. Shaosaburo was sweating more and more as he thought about this. His clothes were soaked. Just as Shaosaburo was at a loss of what to do, Akaragawa took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Very good. Since young Master Ryuto has been elected as the leader, then we can only follow his lead." Ryuto smiled and gave Akaragawa a thumbs up. As expected of Akaragawa, "You're so generous. You're able to let go of things. Leader, you're too kind. To celebrate the formation of the Ranchia Alliance, let's have a good time here." Clap, clap. As soon as Akaragawa finished speaking, he clapped his hands and signaled the people outside to come over. This is the signal to attack. Is Akaragawa going to risk his life? After hearing these two claps, Subaru suddenly felt all the hair on his body stand up, and a cold current enveloped him from head to toe. At the end of the Ranchia Alliance plan, there was an emergency plan that could only be used if there was no other way. That was to call people in and kill everyone here. Before the meeting started, Akaragawa had already gathered hundreds of elite fighters from the White Tiger Gang. They were armed with all kinds of weapons and even guns. They were lying in ambush in the Star Python apartment. No matter how good Ryuto was at fighting, in the face of a group of gun-wielding Extreme Dao, he could only surrender. This was Arakawa Genesis' final killing move. There was a well-known unspoken rule on this street, and that was that even if there was a conflict, no weapons could be used. Otherwise, one would be spurned and besieged by all the Extreme Dao experts. Therefore, it was even more forbidden to use force in the Star Python apartments. Even if one wanted to use force, they could only use their fists to solve the problem. Otherwise, they could forget about continuing in this industry. However, when he was preparing his plan, he didn't seem to have thought about this unspoken rule at all. Anyway, he didn't plan to stay in Extreme Dao anymore. He already had plans to leave. As long as I organize the League of Heroes and hand it over to that lord to manage, I can leave this small island with turbid air and head to the fresh air of free America to live a brand new life with my family. In order to achieve this goal, Arakawa Chuang didn't care about the rules of the underworld and directly attacked. And the current situation was the final moment where the old president was ready to risk his life. Ryuto and the other two Extreme Dao leaders' response was far beyond Arakawa Chuang's expectations. The league was successfully established, but he didn't get the position of the leader. Wasn't this just making a wedding dress for someone else? At this point, he could only kill Ryuto, Kai Yang, and Tessa and use force to unify these Extreme Dao groups. Although this wasn't in line with his initial expectations, Arakawa Chuang had no other choice now. After all, the position of the leader fell to Ryuto, which was equivalent to sentencing this old man and his family to death. Might as well go all out. If it really didn't work, then everyone would die together. Who's afraid of who? Clap, clap. With this thought, Arakawa Chuang clapped his hands and signaled a group of people lying in ambush outside to rush in and kill the 3 extreme Dao leaders. A second passed, and there was no response from outside. 5 seconds passed, and there was no response from outside. 10 seconds passed, and there was still no response from outside. What's going on? Why did the people I arranged? What's wrong? President Arakawa, didn't you say that you wanted us to have fun here and drink together? At this moment, Ryuto stood up slowly and walked to Arakawa Chuang's side. When Ryuto came close to him, a hint of panic flashed in the old president's eyes, and his body shrunk slightly. But even so, he still forced himself to say, maybe my people are distracted. I'll go out and urge them. No need to go. I know where they are. Ryuto said as he took out a small tablet from his inner pocket. He casually turned on the tablet and transferred the image to the position where the surveillance camera was recording. The moment the image appeared on the tablet, Arakawa Chuang felt cold all over and his scalp went numb. Because in that image, the group of White Tiger Gang subordinates that he had arranged were piled together like garbage. Almost all of them were tied up tightly with ropes. When the old hero was dumbfounded, Ryuto reached out and patted his face and smiled. How about it? President Arakawa, why don't you show me what you have? Let's see if you have more trump cards or I have more trump cards. You? Who exactly are you? My people have already controlled all the surveillance cameras in the Star Python apartment. You don't think that we won't find out when so many of your people come in from the area you control, right? There were thousands of surveillance cameras inside the Star Python apartment, and these cameras were also managed by the 5 extreme Dao regions. That was, each extreme Dao region would monitor an area. Before the meeting began, Arakawa Chuang asked his people to sneak up from the surveillance area controlled by Psychedelic Saburo and the White Tiger Gang. He thought that he had done it very discreetly, but in fact, he had already hacked all the cameras in the apartment. There was nothing that the current Rulong group could not see. Therefore, after cutting off the vision of Psychedelic Saburo and the White Tiger Gang, the Rulong group cooperated with the Big Dipper Alliance and the Black Snake Alliance to wipe out all the enemies in the apartment. It was 3 against 2, not to mention that one side had come prepared, while the other side had been attacked passively. All kinds of cameras, radios, and cell phone communications had been cut off. In an instant, they had turned from an organized army into a group of scattered soldiers. With such a huge gap, the conflict between the two sides naturally started and ended quickly. Boom! The next moment, the door of the room was kicked open from the outside. Many apex cultivators dressed in black rushed in with guns and blades in their hands. They pointed their guns at Arakawa Chuang, Skinny Saburo, and Fat Saburo. Obviously, when the voting was still going on in the room, the battle outside had already ended, and it ended with Ryuto, Kai Yong, and Tessa winning. After a while, we will take over your territories and assets. From today onwards, Psychedelic Saburo and the White Tiger Gang will no longer exist, and only 3 of the 5 extreme Dao in Tokyo are left. After leaving Arakawa Chuang, who was scared out of his wits, Ryuto, Kai Yong, and Tessa came to the front of the group of subordinates and looked at the few bastards who were forced to the corner and trembling. It's over. It's all over. When Arakawa Chuang realized this, he couldn't help but kneel on the ground, and at the same time, a strange smile appeared on his face. He. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. He was laughing, crying, and drooling. His body was constantly trembling, and the originally solemn kimono on his lower body had a trace of yellow water stain. He looked like an old madman who had reached the end of his road. From a certain perspective, Arakawa Chuang had given up thinking. Because he knew that no matter how he thought, it was useless, and it was impossible to change this desperate situation. But Skinny Saburo, who was hiding behind Fat Saburo and leaning against the wall with this old man, didn't think so. He didn't give up on his life. Damn it! I knew this old man was unreliable. In the end, I can only rely on myself. Although I don't want Fat Saburo to eat that thing, it seems like there's no other way, or else we will all die here. Looking at the dozens of guns in front of him, Skinny Saburo could only pat the back of his brother in front of him and whispered, "Fat Saburo, take that thing out and eat it." That thing? Fat Saburo turned his head and asked in confusion. "It's the paper I gave you before. Hurry up." "Oh, this thing." Suddenly, Fat Saburo reached out and tore his sleeve, and took out a piece of paper that looked like a matchbox. The paper looked like some kind of ink paper, and it was stained with an ominous black color, giving people a strange feeling. No matter how you look at it, this thing didn't look like something that should be eaten, but Fat Saburo swallowed it without hesitation. Something's wrong? Seeing this guy's action, everyone present felt that something was wrong. So Kai Yong shouted without hesitation, "Shoot! Kill them!" Bang! 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 With the leader's order, the dozens of black suits in front immediately pulled the trigger of their guns, and fatal bullets were fired at the 3 people in the corner. Woo 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 woo! But as the gunshots sounded, Fat Saburo also reached out his big hand and grabbed the table in front of him, and used the huge round table as a shield in front of the 3 people. Bang! Boom! But how could such a table block the bullets of the guns? After at most 1 or 2 seconds, the table exploded from the bullets, and Arakawa Chuang, who was panicking, was directly shot into a hornet's nest. However, although Akanagawa Chuang was killed on the spot, the huge figure that appeared with the strange smoke was still standing straight under the storm of bullets. Chapter 189. Smoke. Why is there smoke? Moreover, this strange smoke seemed to be coming from that big guy's body. Just when the round table was smashed, and the body of Arakawa Chuang fell to the ground, everyone looked at the burly figure standing in the same place. One of the 2 leaders of Psychedelic Saburo, Fatty Saburo, originally had a physique that was far stronger than ordinary people. He was born with divine strength, and with the help of a large number of forbidden drugs, he looked even more tall and strong. His body was incomparably burly, like a mighty and domineering king statue. However, when the dozens of bullets smashed the round table and bombarded the huge body, a strange scene appeared. Huff, 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 huff. At this time, Fatty Saburo's hands were in front of his body, using his thick arms to cover the weakness of his face, and his lower body was standing very steadily, slowly exhaling. The dozens of bullets that were fired at him just now almost all hit his body, and no less than 20 bullets were hit. Even if most of these bullets only hit the arms, body, and legs, it was already a state that ordinary people could not withstand. However, after being hit by so many bullets, Fatty Subaru's body emitted a dense fog. It was as if a strange heat was rising from every pore of his body, causing the fatty's skin to turn red. Thump, thump, thump. At the same time, his heart also issued a terrifying beating sound like a drum. The sound could be heard clearly even from more than 10 meters away, and it was not like the heartbeat of a normal human. Ding! Ding ling ling ling! Just when everyone was dumbfounded looking at the huge body that suddenly changed, a strange crisp sound came from the ground. It was bullets. Dozens of bullets that just hit Fatty Saburo's body. These bullets that hit his body that suddenly became several times stronger did not go too deep, but only stopped outside the skin and muscles, and were immediately pushed out by the continuously expanding muscles. Unknowingly, many parts of the man's body quietly underwent a terrifying change. His height had increased from 1.8 meters to about 2 meters. His arms, neck, legs, and even his torso had obviously become thicker. His muscles had also begun to bulge out of his clothes. He did not look like a body of flesh and blood at all. Instead, he looked more like bricks. What monster? What's wrong with this person? Seeing the sudden changes on Fatty Saburo's body, everyone in the room was stunned. Even the experienced Kai Yang and Tessa could not help but widen their eyes, with a look of disbelief. Indeed, what's wrong with this person? Or to ask a more direct question, is this guy really a human? To be able to withstand a handgun bullet, completely unnatural heartbeat, breathing, and the steam from the pores. All of this made Subaru look like a monster like the Hulk on TV. Moreover, it was accompanied by a strong sense of unreality, as if a monster on TV had come to the real world. As for this series of sudden changes, Long Do was definitely the one who understood what had happened the most out of everyone present. Before Pang Saburo ate the black paper, his personal attributes in the Hooligan Analyzer were as follows. Name: Inada Saburo. Age: 32 years old. Attribute: Wisdom LVL1, Physique LVL4, Courage LVL3, Insight LVL2, Charm LVL1. After eating that black paper, and after his entire body underwent a complete transformation, his personal attributes became like this. Name: Inada Saburo. Age: 32 years old. Attribute: Wisdom LVL1, Physique LVL5, Courage LVL5, Insight LVL1, Charm LVL1. How should he describe it? This guy had literally become a monster. Not only did this guy's physical ability increase from LVL4 to LVL5, reaching the highest level of superhuman realm. Furthermore, Fatty Saburo's courage directly jumped 2 times, from LVL3 to LVL5. What is the concept of LVL5 courage? This is the true meaning: not fearing the heavens or the earth. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, I would still dare to ride on top of his head and shit. Judging from Fatty Saburo's situation, it is impossible for him to have such terrifying courage, unless he is in a state of extreme excitement, which is also the state of forbidden drug enhancement. Therefore, the root of all these changes is undoubtedly the black paper that this guy just ate. His current rapid breathing, rapid heartbeat, abnormal muscle strength and other conditions are obviously caused by some kind of forbidden drug or super forbidden drug. Forbidden drug, in fact, this term is not just a simple drug, but a general term for all forbidden drugs that can cause abnormalities in the human body. At first, the place where humans used forbidden drugs is mostly on the battlefield, where flesh and blood splatters everywhere. Soldiers will take a series of synthetic drugs that have a significant central nervous system stimulating effect to reduce their fear of the battlefield. And with the continuous advancement of science, the place where forbidden drugs are used has become a sports field, but this does not prevent some people from secretly researching some drugs that can make people become superhuman in a short time. Clearly, the forbidden drug that Subaru was using right now wasn't something as simple as strengthening his muscles. Instead, it was an even more tyrannical Superman drug. This drug had directly increased his physique from international warrior to extreme Superman. After consuming this drug, it will bring about an extraordinary monster state. Of course, such an overbearing forbidden drug, the after effects of consuming it are also quite serious. But now Fatty Saburo is too lazy to care so much. Very good, Hell Butterfly has already shown its effect. After seeing the huge change in Fatty Saburo's body, Skinny Saburo, who is hiding behind him, nodded, laughed and said, "Fatty, let's go first." "Ugh. Let's go." After hearing his boss's words, Fatty Saburo, who is gasping for breath, obviously somewhat delirious, suddenly widened his bloodshot eyes and swung his thick right arm towards the wall beside him. Boom! Following a loud bang, the concrete wall, which was at least 30 centimeters thick, was smashed into smithereens by the terrifying monster's fist. Dust and gravel powder filled the room. After punching a hole in the wall, Fatty Saburo reached out and grabbed his boss and jumped out of the hole in the wall. Jumping out of the room. The direction of the wall is the direction of the window. There is nothing outside, only the vertical courtyard of Star Python apartment, which is hundreds of meters high. Although Ryuto and the rest are currently staying in room 408. This room 408 is actually a code word for Star Python apartment. The actual location is not on the 4th floor, but on the 18th floor. With such a high vertical distance like the 18th floor, if a normal creature falls, it will definitely be smashed to pieces. But right after Fatty Subaru jumped out with his big brother, his gorilla-like thick arms directly grabbed onto the outer wall of the apartment building. Creak. The 5 fingers that can almost crush steel penetrated the outer wall of the apartment, as if the wall is soft like bubbles under this guy's hand. Relying on the cushioning force of the wall with one hand, Fatty Saburo brought Skinny Saburo all the way down from the 18th floor like a monster in a movie, leaving behind 5 deep claw marks on the outer wall of the apartment. No. No way. Is this guy really a human? Suddenly, Tessa, who came to the window and watched the 2 guys slide down, swallowed her saliva. At the same time, she couldn't help but reach out and pinch her slender and smooth thighs, wondering if she is dreaming. How is it possible? In the real world, how can someone directly jump down from the 18th floor and rely on one hand to hold the wall to cushion the impact until landing? It is just like shooting a Hulk movie without much Hulk. Just when everyone didn't know what to do, Long Do silently came to the hole that was blasted by Pang San Lang. Kai Yang, send someone to follow me and those 2 guys, absolutely can't let them escape. Send someone? Wait. Didn't you? After hearing Ryuto's words, Kai Yang couldn't help but look at him and wanted to say, aren't you here? Why did you send someone to follow you and those 2 guys? But halfway through Kai Yang's words, Ryuto's figure didn't hesitate to jump out of the hole. From the 18th floor in the air, he chased down. Even if the enemy is a monster with LV5 physique, Ryuto didn't feel fear, he even had a feeling of eagerness. This guy is looking for. But almost everyone who saw this scene almost wanted to say, Ryuto, this guy is looking for death. But when Ryuto's body flew to the outside of the apartment, he used a more elegant way than Fatty Saburo to fly down the stairs. His slender body nimbly landed in the air. 1 foot stepped on the air conditioner on the 17th floor. Bang! The air conditioner that was stepped on made a muffled sound, but it didn't fall down because of this step. Whoosh! Then Ryuto once again jumped to the side, landed on the air conditioner on the 16th floor, and repeated this action. In the eyes of the people upstairs, this young master of the Rulon group was like a Spider-Man in a cartoon, nimbly moving around the air conditioner on the outside wall of the apartment, constantly quickly chasing down the Saburo brothers. An 18-story high-rise building, as long as one misstep, the entire vertical space could fall to their death. In such a dangerous area, relying on the air conditioner to continuously jump down, Ryuto's entire movement seemed so relaxed, as if he was walking on flat ground, as if he wasn't performing an amazing acrobatic performance, but strolling in his own corridor. Bang! Just as Long Do was about to land on the ground, Fatty San Lang, who was not far away, also fell to the ground with a bang. Chapter 190. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise, the Star Python apartment, at night, seemed to tremble. When Pang Subaru's huge body that was at least 300 kilograms smashed onto the ground, it actually directly smashed a crack that was at least 10 meters long on the concrete floor. It could be seen how strong the impact was. But even so, Pang Subaru's unnaturally muscular legs seemed to be completely fine. There was neither fracture nor pain. Or it could be said that he already couldn't feel pain. After landing, looking at Ryuto who was chasing behind like a ghost, Pang Subaru, who was grabbed by Pang Subaru, quickly shouted, "Go! Go quickly! Run as fast as you can!" Oh, okay. Although Pang Subaru was currently in a berserk state, he could still barely understand his big brother's words. Therefore, his huge body immediately took a step forward, like a wild rhinoceros. He rushed out of the Star Python apartment. Pang Subaru rushed out of a wall in front of him, but he didn't care about it. Boom! Following a burst of explosive sound, Pang Subaru's shoulder hit the inside of the wall, completely smashing the thick wall into pieces. Moreover, his figure also quickly rushed out to the street outside. This guy's speed is so fast, this kind of physical ability is simply not something that a normal creature can have. If he rushed into the crowd, it would be troublesome. Although there weren't many people on the street outside the apartment, but at this time, there were still some people scattered around. Ah! What is that thing? Seeing the huge body break through the wall and rush into the street, the surrounding pedestrians suddenly let out a cry of surprise. At the same time, not far away, the 2 patrolling policemen also saw this guy's rampage and quickly rushed over. What is this? Did the gorilla run out of the zoo? Seeing Pang Subaru rushing in this direction, the young patrolling policeman immediately shouted, "Stop! Who are you? Quickly stop!" But the old patrolling policeman at the side quickly took out his gun and shouted, "Quickly take out your gun, or else both of us will be finished. That guy's mental state is abnormal." The old patrol officer, who had been on this street for a long time, could tell at a glance that Pang Sabin was in a manic state where it was impossible for him to listen. He was like a crazy person who had taken too much drugs. In addition, this guy had a physique that was comparable to a gorilla's. If he continued to run around on the streets like this, the damage he could cause would be unimaginable. Fire! So when Fatty Subaru rushed to the distance of only 10 meters away from the two patrol officers, the old patrol officer shouted while pulling the trigger in his hand. Bang! What the hell? The two pistols opened fire at the same time, and the street was flooded with deafening explosions and sparks. But even so, the behemoth that was hit by the bullet didn't stop charging. Instead, it continued to charge towards the two men like an enraged beast. Clearly, with the support of LV-5 physique, ordinary handgun bullets had no effect on the current Pang San Lang. Unless they hit his eyes or other vital points, they would just tickle his steel body. Mamma mia! Just when the two patrol officers thought they were going to be crushed into meat paste, a slender figure rushed out from the side like lightning. Ancient Bajiquan, Iron Mountain Lean. In the next second, Ryuto stepped on the ground. Using the tremor kick, he twisted his body and slammed his shoulder into the left side of Pang Sabin's abdomen. Bang! When the two collided fiercely, a strong explosion sounded. The feeling wasn't like two living bodies colliding. Instead, it was like two trucks colliding at full speed. After the collision, the two unlucky patrolmen were also sent flying by the strong impact of the collision and fainted on the ground 4 or 5 meters away. This collision was earth-shattering. Ryuto's Iron Mountain Lean was strong enough to send a dozen people flying. But when he collided with Pang Sabin's body, he felt as if he collided with an iron wall. At that moment, Ryuto felt a pain in his shoulder. The strong impact forced him back a dozen meters before he could stabilize his body and land on the ground. Of course, no matter how strong Pang Sabin's body was, after being hit by Ryuto, he still fell to the other side. He was like a soccer ball that was kicked away. He rolled on the ground until he reached the lawn of the park a dozen meters away. Apart from Pang San Lang, who had been caught in his hand, was also sent flying. After Ryuto's Iron Mountain Lean landed, the skinny guy felt as if he was hit by a truck. He fell to the ground in a daze. He saw stars and his head was bleeding. What the hell is going on? Before Pang Sabin could react, a hand like an iron clamp had already grabbed his throat and lifted his body from the ground. It was Ryuto. After all, Ryuto was the one who initiated the attack. The impact he received was not as strong as the other two brothers. So he quickly rushed over and grabbed the culprit's neck. He turned around and ran toward a remote factory outside the park. Let go of my big brother. After seeing the scene of his elder brother being taken away, Fatty Subaru also hurriedly got up from the ground. His eyes were red like an enraged bull as he chased after Long Jio. Just like this, the two sides went from one running and one chasing to one chasing and one running. That place should not be a problem. I have to control him as soon as possible. I can't let this guy continue to act recklessly. As he ran, Ryuto raised his head and looked at the nearby factory under the illumination of the night. It was especially quiet. Because it was already night, the factory was quiet. There was no one inside. Obviously, it was the best place to deal with this fat guy. Arriving at the interior of the factory, Long Do lifted the neck of Xiaosaburo, who was about to be strangled to death by him, and directly threw him up, letting him fall on a platform that was more than 10 meters high. Big brother. Pang Sabin, who followed behind, quickly wanted to save him. But Ryuto's figure had already arrived in front of him. In an instant, a fist suddenly flashed in front of Pang Sabin. Then he heard a crisp sound in front of him. Bursts of blood spurted out from the fat nose. Facing this monster who was obviously not human anymore after eating the drug, Ryuto obviously did not have any intention of holding back. He directly raised his hand and used an iron palm. It mercilessly smashed on Pang Sabin's nose. How could the fragile nose resist Ryuto's iron palm? After this palm, Pang Sabin's nose was almost completely broken. A broken nose would cause a large amount of blood loss. Moreover, this kind of injury would also cause severe pain. It would greatly reduce the enemy's fighting spirit. As if... Unexpectedly, Pang Sabin, who received this heavy blow, did not have any reaction at all. His face was full of blood, his nose was crooked, but he immediately let out a beast-like cry. He reached out his hand and grabbed towards Ryuto's direction. Even with a broken nose, he did not even blink. Sure enough, this guy could not feel pain now. After dodging this fatal grab, Ryuto once again sized up this body whose skin had turned into a strange red color. It was gradually becoming less and less like a human. Modified human, enhanced human, or Frankenstein, this was Pang Sabin's current situation. The only way to stop this behemoth was to kill it. Even knocking it out would be difficult. After all, this guy's brain was probably secreting all kinds of hormones to ensure that it wouldn't faint. Even so, Ryuto did not feel that he would lose. After all, although Pang Sabin's physical strength was heaven-defying, he still did not know how to use martial arts. If a martial arts master like Saito Ryuto had LV5 physique, he could almost instantly kill the current Ryuto. Or it could be said that he could instantly kill anyone. However, Pang Sabin was still far from it. Kill. I will kill you. After a series of beast-like roars, Pang Sabin rushed over with a posture that gave people a sense of great pressure. Because of his super-strong physical strength, this rushing momentum was like a human tank. Even Ryuto did not dare to face it head-on. Thus, he dodged to the side. At the same time, he bent his body and used all his strength to kick the inner side of Pang Sabin's thick knee. This kick could be said to be extremely tricky. No matter what kind of monster it was, after being kicked from the inner side of the knee, it could only kneel forward. Bang! After the monster knelt on one knee, Long Do took the opportunity to press forward and quickly launched a storm of attacks. His pair of slender and powerful arms were like two soft whips filled with mercury. Coupled with the ancient Bajiquan fist technique, in a short 2 seconds, he consecutively punched a dozen times. His attacks were extremely fierce. Because he did not have any apprehensions, Ryuto's every attack was accompanied by a sound of breaking air as it solidly kicked Pang Sabin's vital points. Furthermore, it produced a loud sound of flesh and bone colliding. With Ryuto's current strength, if such a violent and murderous attack landed on an ordinary person, even if that person had 10 lives, it would not be enough to survive. Liver, abdomen, throat, back of head and heart. This was the first time that Ryuto did not hesitate to attack these vital points. But even if he attacked these vital points, he was still unable to cause any damage to Pang Sabin. Although Ryuto already felt that this guy had suffered serious injuries, but he always felt that no matter how he attacked, he was always missing that final kick, unable to let his attacks reach the deepest part. Good heavens, this guy is too durable, right? This is simply... Just when Ryuto's continuous attacks were about to be interrupted after a few seconds, a thick arm seized this opportunity and hugged his waist. Hey! Hee catch! Here! Come! Obviously, Pang Sabin had been waiting for this moment. Although his consciousness was not very clear, the rich fighting experience was still engraved in every cell of this body. Taking advantage of the opponent's previous attack, and the short time before the opponent's new attack, the bulging muscular arm had already hugged Ryuto's waist. Then, he suddenly began to exert force inwards. Go to hell! At this time, Fatty Subarang's thick arm tried to squeeze and break Long Do's lumbar spine. The latter immediately felt a tearing sensation as if his body was about to be bent into a U-shape. Bastard! You force me! But Ryuto would not allow himself to be captured without a fight. Before his waist was broken, he raised his empty left hand and a small Uzi submachine gun appeared in his hand. Of all the martial arts, this was the submachine gun assassination technique. After taking out his Uzi submachine gun from the equipment slot, Ryuto directly stuffed the muzzle into Pang Sabin's nostrils and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Chapter 191. Tut tut tut. Tut 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 tut. The 9mm bullet directly exploded in Subaru's nostrils. The explosive force spread upward along the nasal bone, the frontal process of the maxilla, the frontal nasal process, and other parts of the body, all the way to the frontal bone and even the brain. No matter how hard Subaru's body was now covered with steel-like muscles, the internal bones and organs would not change. Bang! As the bullet exploded in his head, the huge body finally fell backward. At the same time, the arm that was holding Long Do also lost the huge force that should have been attached to it. Hey! Hey! While falling, the man's face still had a strange smile. Coupled with his face full of blood and bones, the scene was particularly horrifying. But no matter how horrifying it was, Subaru was still a human. The bullet directly went through the nose and into the brain. This kind of injury was not something a Frankenstein could withstand. It was a real fatal injury. Therefore, after this big guy fell to the ground, his eyes rolled back, and his breathing and heartbeat stopped. He had completely seen a ghost. Finally! It's finally over. Just when Subaru's terrifying body fell to the ground and didn't get up again, Ryuto couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He relaxed his mind and sat down. It had to be said that the battle just now could be said to be the most difficult battle Ryuto had experienced so far. Although the battle with Saito was actually more dangerous, it didn't mean that it was difficult. After all, the battle ended quickly and didn't bring too much torture. But the battle with Subaru was completely different. The battle with this monster could be said to be enjoyable for Ryuto from both the physical and mental aspects. He was forced to the limit in both aspects. The strange body that seemed to have no effect no matter how he attacked, and the terrifying murderous aura that was more ferocious than a beast, made Ryuto feel a lot of pressure. Strictly speaking, the current Subaru was simply not a human, but a monster that couldn't be defeated and wasn't afraid of death. These strange creatures were not something that could be dealt with by fists and feet. It was something that demon hunters or zombie Taoists should do. If Long Do hadn't used the unethical submachine gun assassination technique to shoot out his nostrils, he might have been the one lying on the ground right now. It hurts. My waist almost broke. Phew. Suddenly, Ryuto lifted his shirt and looked at his waist. There was a deep purple mark on the back of his waist. It was like a huge python was deeply imprinted on his skin. However, this was still considered good. If Subaru had been strangled for a while longer, Long Do's waist and spine would have been completely broken. At that time, he would have to pay another 1 million yuan. Da da da. Da 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 da. It's here. Come here quickly. Just as Ryuto was sitting on the ground to rest, Kai Yong rushed into the factory with his men. Because they planned to fight the monster that couldn't be penetrated by handguns, the members of the Big Dipper Alliance had already brought a lot of heavy firepower weapons. From shotguns to fully automatic rifles, to howitzers and even rocket launchers, these were the real weapons that the Big Dipper Alliance had. They looked very powerful. After all, this extreme do specialized in firearms. The firearms in their hands could be said to be the best on the island. If a fight really broke out, it would not be a joke. But now, no matter how powerful the heavy firepower was, it was useless because the monster that Kai Yong and his men were going to kill was now lying on the ground and turned into a huge monster corpse. What? It was already done? Relying on him alone? The moment he rushed into the factory, Kai Yong looked at Subaru who was lying on the ground and Ryuto who was sitting next to him rubbing his waist. He couldn't help but have a look of disbelief. God, this was a monster that couldn't be penetrated by handguns. Ryuto Kiryu actually killed it by himself. This combat power was simply... Should he consider joining the Avengers or something? After seeing this ally, Ryuto also extended his hand and smiled. Brother Kai Yong, can you give me a hand? Amazing, I'm impressed. Kai Yong walked over and helped Ryuto up and praised him with a tone of admiration. As everyone knew, the leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yong, was a very taciturn tough guy. He rarely praised people, and he used this kind of tone to praise people. This was simply unbelievable to his men. After Kai Yong brought people over, the next thing was simple. Fatty Subaru had caused such a huge ruckus just now. The Metropolitan Police Department would definitely be frantically sending people over here. But before they arrived, Ryuto and Kai Yang had already taken away all the bodies of Subaru and Subaru. Not a single hair was left, so the police didn't find anything. Then, on the night of the same day, the entire underground world of Tokyo ushered in a wave of unprecedented perilous waves. The story of the White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Subaru attempting to use the name of an alliance to murder the other 3 gang leaders was spread all over the internet. Almost the entire underground world knew about the dirty deeds of these people. The name of chivalry collapsed overnight. Karakawa Soyoki went from a well-regarded big shot to a scum that was despised overnight. It seemed like his name would go down in history. At the same time, the Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance led the 3 gangs to attack the headquarters of the White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Subaru. With the death or capture of Arakawa Genso and the Saburo brothers, the 2 extreme Dao organizations were like a group of dragons without a leader. Moreover, they were despised in name, causing them to be utterly defeated in the blink of an eye. When the sun rose the next day, the situation of the 5 gangs in Tokyo had completely changed. Most of the members of the White Tiger Gang, who didn't know the truth, were taken in by Ryuto and became non-staff members of the Rulon Group. The members of the Psychedelic Subaru were either killed or expelled. They were banned from entering the Tokyo area. From Ryuto's point of view, most of the members of the White Tiger Gang were still men. They weren't hopeless. They were only confused by Karakawa Soyoki's chivalry before. That was why they followed this boss for so long. Moreover, they didn't do too many evil things before. They were the same as the Rulon Group. However, the group of drug addicts in the Psychedelic Sanlang were different. This organization was originally focused on selling all kinds of drugs. The internal members were naturally drug addicts and drug addicts. Each and every one of them had shifty eyes and pretended to be ghosts. For this group of garbage, Ryuto didn't plan to be soft at all. It was impossible to take them into his team. It was better to throw them into the Tokyo Bay as non-recyclable garbage to feed the fish. Therefore, the Tokyo Bay was particularly noisy that night. Groups of drug addicts and drug addicts were drowned in the bay with cement. Before they died, their mouths were stuffed with their favorite drugs. It was a worthy death. After everything calmed down, at noon the next day, Ryuto, Kai Yang, and Tessa, the 2 leaders of the gang, enjoyed the wine that the old guy Karakawa Soyoki kept in the base of the White Tiger Gang. "Thank you so much for your help this time. Let me propose a toast to you too." On the table, Ryuto opened a bottle of aged white wine and filled it to the brim for Kai Yang and Tessa. Then he raised his glass to toast them. It had to be said that the reason why this operation was so smooth was not only because Ryuto and the Rulon Group were strong enough, but also because of the cooperation of the Big Dipper Alliance and the Black Snake Alliance. "Don't say that. This time, we should be basking in your glory." After raising her glass, Tessa covered her mouth and smiled. Her face was flushed, and she looked refreshed. After a night of property confiscation, the 2 large gang organizations, the White Tiger Gang and the Psychedelic Subaru, were completely disintegrated and annexed. Naturally, the 3 gangs that took action reaped a lot of benefits. This included the addition of personnel, various assets and real estate, many connections, fame, and so on. It could be said that other than the Rulon Group, the Big Dipper Alliance, and the Black Snake Alliance also earned a lot. This made Tessa smile from ear to ear early in the morning. At this time, the more she looked at Ryuto, the more she liked him. Indeed, if we let that fake hero's plan go smoothly, let alone taking advantage, I'm afraid we won't even be able to keep our own belongings. Speaking of this, Kai Yang couldn't help but sigh. In fact, before yesterday, Kai Yang still thought that Karakawa Soyoki was a well-deserved hero, but he didn't expect him to be a complete hypocrite, a piece of trash in the human world. If it wasn't for Ryuto seeing through his scheme and reaching an agreement with the other 2 gangs in time, the Big Dipper Alliance would really have ended in the end. Then, this Ranchia alliance would really become a game where Shozo Arakawa and the Saburo brothers worked together to harvest the leeks. The Dragon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance would definitely lose everything. Just like this, because everyone reaped a lot of benefits, the meal could be said to be enjoyable. Ryuto, Kai Yang, and Tessa drank one cup after another, and the topics of conversation became more and more open. Especially when he found out that Ryuto, a Japanese devil, could actually speak his native language, Kai Yang was even more delighted. He couldn't wait to become sworn brothers with him on the spot. At the table, Ryuto also told the two allies the identity of the boss behind the White Tiger Gang and the psychedelic Subaru. After a full day of investigation, Sensible and Gao Yuan finally found out who the boss behind Karakawa Soyoki and the Subaru brothers were. Although the identity of the boss was hidden very well, as long as he moved in broad daylight, he would be exposed sooner or later. And the identity that was finally investigated shocked Ryuto and the others, because the boss behind the two gangs was actually the wife of the current Wu-de Emperor, the current Empress, Kohei. Chapter 192. After investigating the identity of the boss behind the scenes, Ryuto was first surprised, but then he suddenly felt that this was not something difficult to understand. After all, Rue Hui had made it very clear before that the current empress was not as simple as she looked on the surface. Not only did she come from a political family, but she was also likely to be the spokesperson of the American forces. In other words, the empress was a politician through and through. How was it not news that a politician used extreme means? It was simply a matter of course. Using the seemingly benevolent White Tiger Gang to attack political opponents. Using the psychedelic Saburo to sell drugs to make huge profits. There was no doubt that Empress Wu Da's ambition was much greater than it looked on the surface, and her heart was much darker than it looked on the surface. However, when they found out that everything behind the scenes was actually caused by the empress of this country, Kai Yang and Tessa's expressions suddenly changed, and then they began to curse in a strange manner. Tessa sneered, gritted her teeth and said angrily, "This country is really hopeless. The dignified empress is actually doing such despicable things." Kai Yang also cursed, "The empress of a country should be the mother of the world. Who knew that she was actually such a black-hearted thing? It's really laughable." Kai Yang and Tessa were both foreigners, or rather, they were a group of people who were ostracized by their own people in this country. This group of people was already very dissatisfied with this garbage country, and when they heard that the one who harmed them was actually the empress of a country, their attitude was even more furious. The Japanese themselves were very xenophobic, or rather, they were very xenophobic towards the yellow-skinned Asians. If the white-skinned masters came, they would kneel down and lick them from head to toe, but if the Asians of other countries came, then they would show their true colors. The Big Dipper Alliance was famous for its firearms, and most of its members were like Kai Yang, originally from a mysterious eastern neighbor. According to Kai Yang, he and his brothers killed a few bullies in their hometown, and had no choice but to flee abroad. However, after coming here, they were ostracized and had no way to find a proper job. In the end, when they were about to sleep on the streets, Kai Yang and a few of his brothers decided to band together and walk down this road. In the end, it was just a helpless move to make a living. However, because of Kai Yang and his brothers' hard work, they inadvertently made their business bigger and bigger, and even became one of Tokyo's 5 great extremes. This was something that Kai Yang had never thought of. Tessa's situation was similar. More than a decade ago, she was just a pitiful person who was kidnapped and sold to Tokyo to do some special jobs. She lived in endless pain and torture every day like a dog. Later on, Tessa could no longer stand the oppression of the locals on her and her sisters, so she tried her best to climb up step by step. However, she didn't expect that the path would become darker and darker, and she directly became a leader of the Great Path. Her experience was also very legendary. These 2 Great Path leaders were essentially different from the brothers Shirakawa and Saburo. They didn't do this for the sake of profit. They were forced by the situation and had no choice. Therefore, after 3 rounds of drinking, Kai Yang and Tessa looked at each other, and then said to Ryuto, although the White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Saburo have been eliminated, the current situation is still very unfavorable for us. The Queen will definitely continue to cause trouble for us, right? What's going on? Hearing this, Ryuto couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. After all, this time they had destroyed Owada Masa's Great Path Unification Plan, and completely eliminated two of her most useful underground forces. It would be strange if the Queen didn't fly into a rage and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. In this case, the Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance would still have to face threats from all sides in the future, and there was a high chance that they would be the kind that would attack both openly and covertly. At this time, Tessa continued to add, "If that's the case, why don't we really form an alliance and turn the three into one? This way, everyone can take care of each other and cooperate with each other. What do you think?" Although the Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance were now members of the Ranshia Alliance in name, but with the death of Shirakawa and Saburo, the five Great Path Alliances existed in name only. Moreover, Ryuto and the others didn't want to use the alliance that Shirakawa and Saburo had planned to establish, so they had already burned the Ranshia Alliance document. In the future, they would never mention the Ranshia Alliance, in order to avoid thinking of the disgusting Ranshia Alliance. However, the disbandment of the Ranshia Alliance didn't mean that the three of them couldn't form a new alliance and start afresh. After all, in essence, the business scope of the three Great Path Alliances didn't have any conflicts, and they could even achieve excellent complementary effects. The Rulon Group focused on martial arts. The group of people led by Ryuto were very good at fighting, and they were second to none in the Great Path Alliance. The Big Dipper Alliance focused on connections. The group of people led by Kai Yang had various armed connections all over the world, and they could buy many things that ordinary people couldn't imagine. The Black Snake Alliance focused on financial resources and intelligence. The group of people led by Tessa ran many nightclubs and unspeakable businesses. At the same time, they were also the place where all kinds of intelligence gathered. From this point of view, the business of the three Great Path Alliances didn't conflict, and they could even cover each other and protect each other. If they joined forces, they really had a chance to become an extreme path overlord, or even an extreme path empire. At that time, they would be the new Yanko Star, the Italian mafia in Japan, and the underground kings who would no longer be the running dogs of politicians. Ryuto had actually thought about this a long time ago, so after Tessa and Kai Yang expressed their intention to join forces, he also reached out to the two allies without hesitation. On the same day, the new formation document was completed. Following the three founders' ancient method of cutting off the head of a chicken, this new alliance called Black Hand Alliance was established, and it represented the Tokyo Extreme Path Alliance. Black Hand meant unscrupulous, and it also meant that the people in this alliance were all real villains. After all, the righteous people in this country were all despicable people like Empress Kawata and Hiro Karakawa. Ryuto and the others deliberately named the alliance Black Hand, in order to show their disdain for those so-called righteous people. If you're righteous, then we'll be the villains. Let's see if your righteous people are stronger, or if our Black Hand is stronger. Bring it on. Although the work of establishing the Black Hand Alliance was quite complicated, and it involved the cooperation of the three organizations, Ryuto didn't need to worry about it. The Extreme Path side was handled by Advisor Fujiki, the company side was handled by Gao Yuan, and the legal side was handled by Sensible. Basically, Ryuto once again became idle in the afternoon, and secretly avoided everyone to go to a place that he hadn't been to in a long time. And that place was called Komashiro Daya. When Ryuto stood at the door of the Komashiro Daya that he had been to a few months ago, he actually felt like it was a lifetime ago. A few months ago, Ryuto had just crossed over, and was brought here by the Kamiyoshi people. Furthermore, he was almost poked to death by that old fellow Rabbit Ball. It was also in this place that Long Do made a vow to Lu Li for 2 years. In the end, he polished the statue for quite a long time with his face covered in dust. Only then did he leave like a plumber who had spent a whole night sweating profusely. However, the reason Ryuto came back today wasn't to secretly chat with Colored Glaze, but because he was invited by Rue Hui. Creak. When Ryuto came to the door, the side door quietly opened, and Rabbit Ball's figure slowly walked towards him. He came in front of Ryuto and slightly bowed, and lightly said, "Young Master Ryuto, please, Lady Rue Hui has been waiting for you for a long time." Now that he saw Ryuto Kiryu, Rabbit Ball's emotions were somewhat complicated. After all, he felt that things were getting more and more wrong. At first, Ryuto liked colored glaze, and even publicly said that he wanted to marry her. This was actually a very serious problem, and it also meant that Ryuto and the Komiyoshi people should be serious enemies. But after he interacted with Lady Rue Hui seemed to like this young man, and obviously wanted to support him, which made Rabbit Ball very puzzled. What kind of magic does this young man have? Why does Lady Rue Hui value him so much? Rabbit Ball was a Komiyoshi old man who watched Rue Hui grow up, but even so, he had never seen Lady Rue Hui have such a kind attitude towards anyone. Although this time Rue Hui called Ryuto over not because of personal matters, but to be able to call him home, this was a very rare scene. In this way, Ryuto followed Rabbit Ball around the Komiyoshi villa, and after circling around, they came to a hidden basement. Walking down the stairs, Ryuto saw Rue Hui's graceful figure, and not far from her, there was something similar to a test bench, and on top of it was the body of Pang Saburo that had been dried up. In the dark basement, there was a beauty who bloomed like a flower, as well as a sinister corpse. This scene could be said to be a stark contrast, adding a dangerous aura to the beauty of the Kamikaze family's leader. Of course, in the basement, in addition to Rue Hui, there were several other staff wearing white coats. Looking carefully, there were many kinds of research equipment placed in the corner of the basement. From the clothes of these staff and the various research investigations being conducted, this should be a temporary small research institute. When Ryuto walked down the stairs, Rue Hui turned to him and smiled, "Ryuto, you are here." At this moment, it seemed that in Ryuto's eyes, she didn't look like the master of Komiyoshi, nor was she a powerful woman in Tokyo, but a kind and lovely big sister. At least Ryuto thought so. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.